And I represent the 38th Legislative District. I serve as chair of this committee. The committee will take up the bills in the order posted outside of the hearing room. Our hearing today is your public part of the legislative process. This is your opportunity to express your opinion on the proposed legislation before us today. We do ask that you limit handouts. This is important to note. If you are unable to attend the public hearing and would like your position stated for the record, you must submit your position and any comments using the legislature's online database by 12 p.m. the day prior to the hearing. Letters emailed to a senator or staff member will not be part of the permanent record. You must use the online database in order to become part of the permanent record. To better facilitate today's hearing, I ask that you abide by the following procedures. Please turn off your cell phones and other electronic devices. The order of testimony is introducer, proponents, and opponents, neutral, and closing remarks. If you will be testifying, please complete the green form and hand it to the committee clerk when you come up to testify. If you have written materials that you would like distributed to the committee, please hand them to the page to distribute. We need 11 copies for all committee members and staff. If you need additional copies, please ask a page to make copies for you now. When you begin to testify, please state and spell your name for the record. Please be concise. It is my request that you limit your testimony to 3 minutes. If necessary, we will use the light system. Green, 2 minutes. Yellow, 1 minute remains. Red, please wrap up your comments. If your remarks were reflected in previous testimony, or if you would like your position to be known but do not wish to testify, please sign the white form at the back of the room, and it will be included in the official record. Please speak directly into the microphone so our transcribers are able to hear your testimony clearly. I'd like to introduce committee staff. To my immediate right is research analyst Jack Spray. Also to my right at the end of the table is committee clerk Kennedy. The committee members with us today will introduce themselves beginning at my right.
Good afternoon, Senator Linehan from Legislative District 39.
Senator Joni Olive Wright, District 17, Wayne, Thurston, Dakota, Wayne, Thurston, Dakota, and Dixon County, and it's Tuesday.
We're all feeling that way.
Sorry about that.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Tom Breege, represent District 41.
Good afternoon, Danielle Conrad, North Lincoln's Fighting 46 Legislative District.
And I'll ask our pages to stand up and introduce themselves and tell us what they're studying and where at.
I'm Trent. I'm studying political science over at the University of Nebraska.
I'm Audrey. I'm also studying political science at the University of Nebraska.
Thank you. Please remember that senators may come and go during our hearing as they may have bills to introduce in other committees. Refrain from applause or other indications of support or opposition. For our audience, the microphones in the room are not for amplification, but for recording purposes only. And with that, we will begin with LB 222. Welcome, Senator Fredrickson.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you. I was worried we wouldn't have a quorum for a minute.
So are we.
So good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Murman and members of the Education Committee. For the record, I am John Fredrickson, John Fredrickson, and I represent District 20, which is in Central West Omaha. I'm happy to be here today to introduce LB 222, a bill that will help adults and juveniles with criminal histories get the education and training they need to move on from their mistakes and contribute to our workforce. LB 222 provides that no publicly funded college or university in Nebraska shall, as part of its student application and admissions process, inquire about the criminal history of an applicant, except as required by state or federal law when such information is offered voluntarily. LB 222 covers only the admissions process and does not cover other administrative applications, including on-campus housing or athletics. Nebraska law currently prohibits public employers from asking an applicant's criminal record or history until the public employer has determined that the applicant meets the minimum employment qualifications. Fair chance hiring is good public policy because it provides opportunities for people to get their foot in the door, rebuild their lives, and contribute to our workforce. Pivotal to these employment opportunities is the ability to receive education and job training. The national unemployment rate among formerly incarcerated folks is 27%, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. About 2/3 of job postings require some level of post-secondary education, including certificates, associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, and other degrees. The U.S. Department of Labor projects that just over 5 million entry-level job openings annually over the next decade will require some form of post-secondary education. A recent report from NCLS shows that more than half of formerly incarcerated people hold only a high school diploma or GED, which is twice as high as the general population. This is all especially significant in Nebraska because of our state's prison overcrowding and the importance of successful reentry. Approximately 95% of state prisoners will be released from prison at some point, so we need to ensure opportunities are available for them to get the education they need to contribute to our workforce. Nebraska also consistently has been one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, currently at 2.6%. Governor Pillen has spoken of the need to ensure people exiting our prisons join the workforce and live productive lives. LB 222 will help that happen by removing a barrier to employment and allowing more employers to find skilled workers that they need. Perhaps one of the best examples of the opportunities that can happen when we increase access to college is the story of Sean Hopwood, a native Nebraskan who has been featured nationally. His journey took him from robbing banks in small towns in Nebraska to spending 11 years in federal prison to writing of a legal petition for a fellow inmate so compelling that the U.S. Supreme Court heard the case. Hopwood went on to earn his undergraduate and law degrees. Today, he is an esteemed professor at Georgetown Law School and an appellate lawyer. In terms of the current landscape, we don't have a measure on how many people might be missing opportunities in the workforce because of the criminal history question, but there is no doubt that the existence of the question itself certainly provides a chilling effect for someone seeking to better their lives. More than 1,000 higher education institutions currently use what is referred to as the Common Application. This Common App does not ask people about an applicant's criminal history, but not every Nebraska college or university uses the Common App. So there are some institutions that are still asking the questions. Many institutions have already removed the criminal history question from their admissions process. Others I have spoken to, including state colleges, tell me that removing this question will not be a problem as long as they can continue to ask the question for other purposes, including campus housing. We all want to make sure that colleges can continue to keep everyone safe. LB 222 will continue to allow colleges and universities to ask about criminal history and background checks beyond the admissions process. You will notice a fiscal note on the bill from the University of Nebraska. I'm happy to say that I've worked with the university to amend the bill and remove the fiscal note. AM 91 clarifies that this bill does not apply to inquiries occurring subsequent to the admissions and applicant process as part of the professional licensure process or an academically required clinical or field placement. I have a letter from the University Vice President for External Relations, Heath Mello, making clear that AM 91 removes both their concerns and the fiscal note. With that, I ask you to advance LB 222 from the Education Committee. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for Senator Fredrickson at this time? Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
Proponents for LB 222?
Good afternoon, Chairman Murman and members of the Education Committee. My name is Courtney Wittstruck, COURTNEY WITTSTRUCK. I am the Executive Director of the Nebraska Community College Association, and I'm here today on behalf of my member colleges to provide testimony in support of LB 222, which would prohibit higher education institutions in Nebraska from inquiring about a prospective student's criminal history or juvenile court record during the application and admissions process, except as required by state or federal law. Nebraska Revised Statute 85-962 requires Nebraska's community colleges to be open access. to be open access institutions that promote the success of students who have been traditionally underserved in other educational settings. Accordingly, as open access institutions, our colleges are always supportive of initiatives that would remove barriers to people seeking higher education. Currently, about 58% of Nebraskans aged 25 to 34 have a post-secondary degree, certificate, diploma, or other industry credential. Last session, many of you were involved with legislation that passed LR 335, which set a goal to increase that percentage to 70% by 2030. A key to achieving this lofty goal is to provide more Nebraskans with access to higher education, which LB 222 would do. Our college's policies and practices already align with this proposed legislation as it pertains to general acceptance. There may, however, be specific situations in which criminal justice history could potentially be considered, such as those pertaining to housing, admission into a particular program, etc. But those situations are few and far between. In summary, the Nebraska Community College Association member colleges stand in support of this bill, as it would provide more Nebraskans with greater access to the life-changing benefits of higher education. Thank you for your time today, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Wistrich? Senator Albright.
Thank you, Chairman Murman. Thanks for being here with your testimony.
Thank you.
In the beginning, you said you would agree, except that if something's required by state or federal law. What would those requirements, give me some examples of what they might ask you to do that we wouldn't.
So it was stated in the bill, except as required by state or federal law. So if something would come up that we discovered was prohibited by state or federal law, obviously we would follow that to the extent
Do you have any
necessary.
examples that may have happened at your colleges?
I do not. I just was taking it directly from the bill language.
Okay, so you don't have any situations on campuses today that would prevent this from happening?
As it pertains to general admission, none that I know of, but there are certain situations where it could come up in, like the Senator mentioned, housing, maybe a particular program. For instance, if someone was studying early childhood education, for instance, and had a background that would not be conducive to someone working with children, then something like
So at that
that.
time, you would inquire.
Yeah,
if-
but-
what their background would be.
Correct.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Senator
Just to
Conrad.
follow up on that point, thank you so much. Good to see you again. And I think Senator Fredrickson did cover it in his opening, but just want to follow up on Senator Albright's question to make sure that we have kind of a clear understanding. What this measure does, it says you can't have a blanket rule, but it doesn't prohibit an institution of higher education from complying with other requirements that it may exist in other areas of law, a more narrowly tailored approach versus kind of a blanket
Correct.
kind of approach. Is that kind of a fair?
Correct.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Other proponents?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairperson Murman and members of the Education Committee. My name is Anahi Salazar, A-N-A-H-I-S-A-L-A-Z-A-R, and I am representing Voices for Children in Nebraska. Education can be an important key to successful reentry. Every Nebraskan should have the same access to higher education, no matter their past circumstances. Eliminating barriers for individuals who were just as involved and are seeking to attend public colleges and universities is good for all of Nebraska. Because a successful reintegration back into society for justice-involved individuals benefits the individual, their families, and our communities. For these reasons, Voices for Children supports LB 222 to increase access to higher education for young people seeking to move forward in their lives. When colleges or universities ask about criminal history on applications, individuals are less likely to finish the application once they come across the question, which poses a significant barrier to enrollment. At the same time, research also shows that previously justice-involved individuals who pursue education cut the likelihood of returning to prison within the first 3 years by over 40%. Simultaneously, research suggests that collecting applicants' criminal history doesn't make campuses safer. Excluding individuals, colleges and universities can reaffirm their commitment to equal opportunity and contribute to a stronger future by welcoming every otherwise qualified student. Currently, there are 7 states that have passed legislation termed Beyond the Box or Ban the Box, which eliminates the question about past convictions. Opening up pathways for higher education to every Nebraskan impacted by the legal system can have a positive aftermath, not only for the individual, allowing them an opportunity to lead productive lives, but also for the greater community. LB 222 will help Nebraska foster campuses and classrooms with more diversity and inclusion, enriching overall educational experiences. I want to thank Senator Fredrickson for bringing this important issue forward and the committee for your time. We urge you to advance it, and I'm available to try and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Any questions from Ms. Salazar? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other proponents?
Good afternoon, Chair Murman and members of the Education Committee. My name is Jasmine Harris, JASMINEHARRIS, and I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for RISE. I request that our testimony be part of the public hearing record that shows RISE is in support of LB 222. RISE is the largest nonprofit organization in Nebraska focused solely on habilitative programming in prisons and reentry support. And our overall mission is to break generational cycles of incarceration. Many of our program participants, who we refer to as builders, are seeking higher education credits and certificates while incarcerated in the Nebraska Department of Corrections. There are college courses already being offered, many of which are offered by Metro Community College and University of Nebraska at Omaha. The proposed legislation of LB 222 will offer people like our builders coming out of incarceration the opportunity to continue their higher education aspirations without having to bear the guilt and shame of checking a box on an admissions application that they have a criminal history, especially since they started these programs while already incarcerated. When someone enrolls in these courses, they are participating in a pro-social activity, which is one of the keys of reentry well-being. Another key to reentry well-being is meaningful work trajectories. With many colleges and universities qualifying for the Second Chance Pell Grant across the nation, Metro Community College being the only Nebraska college who had received that funding, it is quite clear that higher education attainment is critical in providing skills and the opportunities for people coming out of incarceration to maintain meaningful and gainful employment. The Vera Institute of Justice reported that people who were incarcerated that participated in higher education programs were 48% less likely to recidivate than those who did not. We should not make it harder for individuals to continue their education once returning to the community. If checking a box on an application for admissions to college prevents an individual who is formerly incarcerated from moving forward with something they started while incarcerated, this would be highly regarded as a continuation of their punishment, if not cruel and unusual, and can have a negative impact on their reentry journey. Currently, there are two bills that have been introduced this session that will go hand in hand with this bill to ensure that we are removing barriers for people's access to meaningful career trajectories. LB 16, introduced by Senator Breezy, to have clear eligibility requirements around professional licensing, and Senator Conrad, LB 367, which will remove this same question from job applications in the private sector. Nebraska Statute 48202, which Senator Fredrickson referenced in his opening, talks about how public employers had to remove this question from their applications. So in keeping with this statute, this section should be extended to include when people are submitting applications for admission to public colleges and universities. And it should be extended to private colleges and universities as well. And for these reasons, RISE supports LB 222 and asks that committee members vote the bill to general file. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Harris? Senator Conrad?
Thank you, Chair Murman. Thank you, Ms. Harris. Jasmine, it feels so formal. It's good to see you again, friend. Just a couple of quick questions because we don't always have an opportunity to go a lot deeper on some of the other areas related to criminal justice and smart justice policies to address mass incarceration and racial injustice in Nebraska due to the jurisdictional nature of this subject matter committee. But that's one thing that I'm actually really excited about with this piece of legislation. I know it's been introduced in the past and gone to the Judiciary Committee, but maybe it's good to have a fresh look at education and to show the intersections about how some of these policies do impact our mass incarceration and racial injustice problem in Nebraska. I was just hoping that you could use this opportunity to educate us on the Education Committee a little bit more about the front lines work that you and RISE does and how access to education and meaningful employment helps to break those cycles of incarceration and recidivism, and how that really advances our shared public safety goals. So like, just help us to kind of get a better understanding when you're working with folks inside or returning citizens to our community, like what are those very, very top challenges that you're helping them deal with in order to be more successful?
Yeah, most definitely. So with RISE, we are operating a program in 7 of the 10 Nebraska Department of Correction facilities. And our program really focuses on employment readiness, character development, and entrepreneurship. As Senator Fredrickson referenced earlier, about 95% of individuals will come back home after incarceration from our facilities. And we have to prepare them to gain whatever skills that they possibly can, right? So as our individuals who are in our program are working through that piece of it, we'll break it down into 2 sections. That first half really focuses on that employment readiness and character development. So people start to deal with inside things that a lot of people don't touch. So guilt and shame, how to make apologies, things like that, that if you don't really work on, it won't, no matter what you do in life, if we don't work on the inside, it's going to come up anywhere we go. And the employment readiness piece, we are really fortifying partnerships with like the Nebraska Department of Labor and figuring out how do we ensure that we're getting people the skill set they need for the high demand, high wage, high skilled jobs. And so when we're talking about these other pieces of legislation, like fair chance licensing and fair chance hiring, what barriers are we able to remove to ensure that people are able to advance as they move forward? The entrepreneurship piece is all about entrepreneurial mindset growth. When you look at how you break down, most people have an idea, but then being able to analyze, to build from a foundation, to be able to present it is what we're giving the people the skill set to dig into, letting people know that they have strengths and they are worth something for people to hear who they are and what they have in store. And the whole thing about entrepreneurship is when a lot of people struggle with getting jobs when they come out, when they get those jobs that we call survivor jobs, where they're not able to pay bills. They want to be able to make money to take care of themselves and their families. And entrepreneurship is a big key to that. So we really focus in on that, which we've started our business academy. So we are helping people in the community who have been impacted by the justice system start their businesses, get those business plans created and connecting them to funding opportunities. So that way it is job creation through entrepreneurship. So there's a big thing. We do a lot.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely. And, I definitely had a different point of view on some things from the past director of corrections, Director Frakes. But I know that we, all stakeholders regarding the criminal justice system really admire the work that you and your organization do to bring positive programming to Nebraskans who are incarcerated and returning citizens to our community as well. So, when I'm looking at this, I think that the time is right to revisit it because it checks a lot of boxes. Our number one challenge in Nebraska, workforce development and pipelines. Low cost alternatives to addressing our mass incarceration and racial injustice kind of problems that we're grappling with year after year here in Nebraska. So I think it's very exciting, and I really appreciate you giving us a little bit more information.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Harris? Thank you very
Thank
much. Other proponents?
Good afternoon. My name is Rose Godinez, spelled ROSEGODINEZ, and I'm here to testify on behalf of the ACLU of Nebraska in favor of LB 222. We thank Senator Fredrickson for introducing this legislation. One of the long-term impacts of having a criminal record is that many Nebraskans find it nearly impossible or are deterred from obtaining a higher education. Higher education institutions are regularly asking about an individual's criminal record, which then has a chilling effect. And research shows that asking about a criminal record at admission does nothing to protect public safety, but seeing the box for sure deters individuals from applying. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, every year at least 30,000 different people are booked into local jails in Nebraska. And those numbers are continuously increasing, particularly for Black, Latine, and Native Nebraskans. Nebraska has already began cutting the tape on employment, and I believe we can continue to do that with this piece of legislation. So for those reasons, we urge you to advance this bill to general file.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other proponents for LB 222? Any opponents for LB 222? Anyone want to testify in a neutral position for LB 222? Senator Fredrickson, your waves closing. So that ends the hearing on LB 222. And we will move on to LB 231. Senator Dungan.
Good afternoon, Chair Murman and members of the Education Committee. I'm Senator George Dungan, Georgedungan. I represent the people of Northeast Lincoln in Legislative District 26. Today I'm introducing LB 231. This bill addresses the issue of excessive absenteeism from school and truancy referrals to the county attorney for prosecution. Current law requires school districts to have a policy regarding excessive absenteeism and a process by which students address excessive absences. School districts must provide certain services and notices to parents or guardians when children experience absences. Current law allows for schools to refer an instance of excessive absenteeism to the county attorney for truancy prosecution after a student has 20 days of absence in a year. When a school refers a case to the county attorney, they are required to provide written notice to the referral to the parent and or guardian. LB 231 does a number of things. LB 231 first would direct school districts to provide written communication to parents or guardians as to excessive absences well in advance of referral to the county attorney. This is to provide for a collaborative plan to improve attendance and provide certain services in order to do so. LB 231 would also require that these services are to be provided to students before or upon the 20 days of absence. The services shall include, if agreed to by parents or the person in charge of making the educational decisions of the student, an educational evaluation to determine whether any intellectual, academic, physical, or social emotional barriers are contributing factors to the lack of attendance. The bill also makes a minor change in calculating the 20 days in a school year. Some districts and county attorneys interpret year to mean calendar year. This specifies 20 days within a school year. What this bill is trying to minimize or prevent is a process whereby a referral for prosecution occurs simply upon a student having 20 days of absence. The intent is to provide for a process whereby a school provides services to encourage attendance prior to referral. This will minimize referrals to county attorneys. Nothing in this bill interferes with the ability of the county attorney to be involved at any stage in the process to address excessive absenteeism. A couple of other points I'd like to make beyond just my written remarks here. I've had an opportunity to speak with some school districts about this. Specifically, I talked to Omaha Public Schools, Lincoln Public Schools, just to kind of gauge where they were at with some of the requirements in here. For those who don't know, I did work with juveniles who were justice involved when I was a public defender. So I've done truancy cases. I've worked on truancy cases. And I want to just take a second to say I know that LPS and OPS in particular, just because those are the ones I'm most familiar with, do a fantastic job of trying to establish these collaborative plans ahead of time. And my intent here was not to add any kind of overly burdensome language. I believe these schools currently have plans in place that do a really good job of addressing a lot of the issues. The goal here was to essentially say the current language says you have to have a plan. It doesn't say you have to do anything about it. And that's part of my problem, is that as of right now, schools on their own have decided to implement these plans positively and had an impact on affecting students who are dealing with truancy. But if they chose not to utilize all of those services upon hitting 20 days, they wouldn't necessarily have to in the way they would under LB 231. So our intention is to say, great, you have this plan. We're just saying that you must implement it or have written documentation of the implementation of that plan prior to referral to the county attorney. And if you've already been doing that, wonderful. In addition to that, we spoke about the language surrounding the evaluation. And I just want to point out that in the current law, on my LB 231, it's page 3, line 10, educational evaluation is already something that is considered in the collaborative plan. We crossed that out and just sort of extrapolated or made it a little clearer what we wanted included in that plan in the language above that. In conversations I've had with some of the schools, I think there were concerns that using the word intellectual in there maybe was going to trigger special ed evaluations or things such as that. I do think that there are certain issues that should have an IEP that absolutely do affect truancy. But that being said, I understand that the vast majority of schools currently are analyzing these on their own. And there's a lot of federal language that determines when and where those evaluations have to be done and what they're supposed to determine. So I am open to and am going to continue working with the school districts to make sure that the language we added in there regarding the educational evaluation is not a barrier to implementing these services. And so I'm definitely going to continue in contact with Omaha Public Schools, Lincoln Public Schools, and anybody else who wants to reach out to me regarding what all an educational evaluation includes. But I do just think it's important to note that was already something that could be considered in this plan. We're just trying to clarify that we want it to essentially look at all the various factors that could be affecting whether or not a youth is truant. And so I wanted to make those points. And with that, I would urge the committee to consider 231, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thank you. Any questions for Senator Dungan? Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Chairman Murman. Good to see you, Senator. Welcome back to the Education Committee. Senator Wayne and I were just kind of looking at each other during your opening because we had Truancy Day and Judiciary just last week. So I understand that some of your ideas in this bill are kind of related to some other bills that we have pending for his committee as well. And I don't want to put you on the spot, or maybe some other folks who follow behind can help us to figure out kind of how these bills work together, or kind of what their separate approaches are. I kind of see them as complementing each other rather than in contrast to each other, but just wanted to give you a chance to maybe connect the dots on those, if you know.
Yeah, so
I don't expect you to know everybody else's bills.
I was, thank you, I appreciate that. I was fortunate enough to be in there that day, so I did hear some of the testimony regarding your bill pertaining to truancy that's come this year. I think you're right. They definitely complement one another. And I think the overarching theme that all the bills try to address, which I think is incredibly important to note, is that what we're trying to do is provide youth the services and the care and the rehabilitative efforts they need to ensure they're getting proper assistance for whatever's causing that truancy without just diverting them into the juvenile justice system and assuming that's going to take care of it. Like I said, I used to work in these cases. I think the Lancaster County Attorney's Office has actually done a really good job of trying to divert more youth away from the juvenile justice system by using truancy diversion and other sort of quasi-problem solving courts at a juvenile level to try to help address a lot of these issues. And so I think that that's the thread and the theme we see between all these is the acknowledgement that placing a juvenile on probation just for truancy, while in some cases may be helpful, can also in other cases not solve the actual underlying problem. And I have personal anecdotal experience that I don't want to necessarily get into here because we're talking about kids' lives, but you definitely see it when you represent juveniles in the truancy system that they're not bad kids. They deal with oftentimes familial issues, substance use disorder from parents maybe or other guardians, houselessness. I mean, there's monetary issues and socioeconomic problems. I mean, we could go on and on about it forever, but the goal here is to say the school board has a plan in place and we just want to make sure it's being implemented effectively. And we want to make sure those students are having that help. And I think obviously some of the language in your bill was trying to make sure those additional services are provided and we're not using a blunt instrument to address a really nuanced problem. And so I think all of the bills kind of work together to do that.
No, that's really helpful. And I agree. I mean, I've heard from parents across the political spectrum about how the current truancy laws are really being weaponized against parents, whether that's for religious purposes or sports purposes or illness or poverty or a host of other things. I think that the approach that we have today really is frustrating to a lot of our shared goals about education, about public safety, about family integrity. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to maybe put our heads together with our friends on Judiciary Committee and come up with maybe some sort of package perhaps to maybe take a second look at reforming some of these truancy issues, because I think we're seeing a lot of unintended consequences about how these rules play out. And unfortunately, no one's accountable, which is the other thing that I'm frustrated about. The schools are kind of pointing at the county attorneys, and the county attorneys are kind of pointing at the schools, and families are stuck in the middle. So I don't know if you'd like to respond to that, but.
I don't want to take too much time, but I definitely would agree. I mean, I think that obviously the goal I think that we all share is making sure students get a proper education and they have their issues they're dealing with addressed. And I think that's something we're all trying to work towards. Concern that I have oftentimes is youth who are, for example, sick but don't have an opportunity to go to a doctor's office. That counts as an unexcused absence. And that's something that we see across the board, where for those not familiar, Lincoln Public Schools has a system where if you miss 5 days, you get a letter. You miss 10 days, you get a letter. You miss, I think, 15 and then 20. They send out these letters, and each letter has a different set of steps, essentially, that you have to follow. And so if you have a kid that gets strep throat or maybe has a cold and you don't send to school, but you don't go to a doctor and get a note specifying that, that counts as an unexcused absence. And I know that that is there for a reason, because we obviously, on the flip side of things, don't want parents abusing this to take kids out of school unnecessarily, but it is problematic because then you see the county attorney and the collaborative plan being implemented at times for students who don't need it. And I think that that's just one small issue that we see there. And I think you're right, it does disproportionately affect marginalized populations. I mean, we see on a regular basis, whether it's students of color or from a lower socioeconomic status or whatever it is, in rural areas too. We see these laws, again, kind of a blunt instrument trying to effectuate a nuanced solution, having a somewhat negative impact. And so I share some of those concerns. It's really complicated. Truancy is a really difficult issue to address. But I just hope that this is one building block in that potential solution that we can have moving forward.
Yeah, I liked how a testifier last week described it as, it's not your grandfather or your father's truancy. This isn't just like kids acting out and skipping school for the fun of it. It's become a much different kind of dynamic, and we need to kind of update our laws to address kind of the current situation. So,
yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Senator Linehan.
Thank you, Chairman Murman. So back to your example, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
So to get an excuse for being ill, you have to have a slip from a doctor?
As of right now, that's how it's interpreted in a lot of jurisdictions.
So it's the law, not the school's standard.
Correct. Yeah. I believe there's a Supreme Court case that when the law was modified with regard to truancy around 2013, 14, I don't remember the exact year. It was argued at the Nebraska Supreme Court what is an excused absence and what isn't. And part of the reason behind that is when we would get, again, I worked at the juvenile unit, so we'd get these packets of discovery. And in that packet of discovery, it contains their attendance record. And what I would do is go through and highlight what counted as an unexcused absence and what didn't. And they put little notations for what's an excuse or for what each absence was. So like parental excused, I think would be one. Doctor, like DR meant doctor's note. Some were just unexcused with no explanation. And the only ones that didn't count towards the 20 days were doctor notes. And so all of the other excused absences, even if a parent called in, still technically is an unexcused absence with regards to truancy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? I've got one. And I don't remember this real well, but I think I have it right. A superintendent from somewhere in Nebraska told me that the best way to stop truancy, and maybe this is already allowed, I'm not sure, but you said it typically goes to now it goes to the county attorney. Is that right?
So upon reaching 20 days of unexcused absences, the school may file with the county attorney that they've reached that point, and then the county attorney can file 3B, a truancy charge, to put it simply, against the juvenile and sort of start that process. There are sort of off-ramps, I know, that individual jurisdictions have tried to build. Like I said, the county attorneys here in Lancaster County have implemented various diversionary programs and things where they're trying to work with youth on that. But that's all county attorney and jurisdiction specific, and a lot of that depends on schools and operating procedures around there. But they are allowed to send to the county attorney after hitting 20 days of unexcused absences.
Okay. And I may not remember this right, but he said in Iowa, they have a law, I guess, that if they're truant, if a student's truant, they can take away their driver's license. And his suggestion was if we did that in Nebraska, that it would pretty much end truancy. So I'm just wondering, you said you'd had experience with that. What's your opinion on that?
I would say most of the students that I represented didn't have their driver's licenses yet, which I think is also interesting. And I think that goes towards some of the points that were made earlier. Sometimes there are students who just skip school to skip school, but a lot of the people who end up referred for truancy are students with ongoing medical conditions or chronic medical conditions, or possibly undiagnosed or untreated mental health or behavioral health issues where they struggle to be in school for anxiety reasons or things like that. And so I think that may work in some of those cases, but I would be nervous to assume that would be the only solution, just given that it does affect a wide population of people. And again, in my personal experience, you see folks dealing with truancy who do have a lot of other things going on, who ultimately admit in juvenile court or plead guilty essentially, but they admit to the truancy charge because they acknowledge that based on the law, there's 25 days of unexcused absences here, but if we have a day-long trial on this, it's going to be the same outcome. And so they sort of speed it up. And so I think that's part of the issue is, we may be able to sit here and explain, well, no, this kid was actually sick. He wasn't just skipping school. But the way that it's currently being interpreted, there's really no avenue to address that. And so I think that's part of the problem.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned, I think, that most of the kids you worked with were younger than that.
Mm-hmm.
I would think quite often truancy would start sooner than 16 at least, but I guess you can have a school permit at 14, so then you're getting down there. But okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Proponents for LB 231.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Members of the Education Committee, my name is Elizabeth McClelland, ELIZABETH and I am a senior attorney at Education Rights Council, also known as ERC. We're a nonprofit whose mission is to remove legal barriers to education equity. Prior to my work with ERC, I practiced in our juvenile justice system in Douglas County for well over 10 years. In private practice, as a guardian ad litem and defense attorney, and also as a deputy Douglas County attorney. As a county attorney, I prosecuted truant juveniles and worked with the Juvenile Assessment Center, which was our juvenile diversion program, as the assigned attorney to screen charges. I also worked with the Juvenile Assessment Center in their crossover youth panel from time to time for children that were facing charges, and were also wards of the state due to parental neglect. I'm here today on behalf of ERC to testify in favor of LB 231. My experience tells me that we need to first look to schools to be accountable prior to referring students for truancy. LB 231 asks schools to ensure prior to referral that a student's excessive absences are not actually a result of an underlying disability. Often it is a disability like anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, or other trauma that stands between a child and school attendance. Currently, school districts are not actually assessing or seeking consent to assess a child to figure out the underlying cause of absences prior to referring them to our system. Right now, children with disabilities are being punished from truancy filings. LB 231 would help put the work up front instead of having to figure out only after a truancy filing has been filed that actually there is a disability and then having to go back to the school districts to request an evaluation and further services. The children that I am here today advocating for are not that your typical naughty kids as was being discussed earlier. These are not the kids that are just skipping class that we classically think of as truant. I'm here on behalf of a child that has been so bullied that they are physically ill at the thought of attending school. I'm also here for the child who hasn't been taught to read. They cannot understand the work, and they are so far behind in school that they feel there is no point in going, and they are not attending. I'm also here for the child that is extremely overwhelmed by the sensory overload in a general education classroom, the child with autism who needs a smaller setting. LB 231 simply asks school districts to ensure that every effort has been made and exhausted before criminalizing absenteeism. In the past 3 years, ERC has directly represented over 600 children in our juvenile justice system. Far too many of these children have unmet school needs, and LB 231 would help alleviate this problem. LB 231 has no fiscal note, there's no additional cost to the state, and the school districts already receive funding to engage in what is called child fine, which is what LB 231 asks them to do. Please understand that I'm not suggesting that filing truancy charges is never appropriate. Unfortunately, however, much of the time I see years of educational records indicating social and behavioral concerns without the appropriate interventions required by law. Excessive absences is a behavior that can be an indicator of something larger, something we need to identify and something we need to address before referral to the county attorney's office. LB 231 simply asks school districts to consider this and to request consent by parents to evaluate for additional services if the evidence supports it. Thank you for your time, and I urge you to move this bill out of committee. I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions for Elizabeth Bellin? Yes, Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Chair Murman. Thank you for being here. And then if you could help me understand, when were you practicing in the county attorney's office generally?
I practiced there for about 7 years.
About 7 years. Okay.
2013 to 2020.
Oh, okay, perfect. Because that, I was just trying to get my head around the time frame here. And I think Senator Dungan mentioned it a bit in his opening or in his conversation with Senator Linehan a little bit. So I'm trying to think back and kind of run through the mental Rolodex. In my last go around, truancy was kind of this Wild West kind of aspect of the juvenile justice system, and there wasn't a great deal of uniformity to how it was playing out in different schools, and it was causing all kinds of disparities and inequitable results. So Senator Ashford, as part of juvenile justice reform, kind of tried to use this 20-day kind of standard to bring some clarity and uniformity to it. And so I think that was kind of a general thinking about kind of how we got to that policy. But do you know, during your time when you were prosecuting those cases after the juvenile justice reform efforts, you know, what did you really see in terms of like how people showed up in your case file, in your stacks? I mean, was it your classic like kind of kids goofing off or acting out and skipping schools? Maybe sometimes, but was it really more a lot of these other kind of factors?
You know, a lot of what I saw then is still what I'm seeing now,
Okay.
And even in my different roles, right? But I think there was always cases where we had our classic truant kid that was, you know, goofing off, skipping class, whatever. But there was a tremendous amount of kids with mental health needs, extreme anxiety, typical to what I had referred to earlier, that just weren't having their needs met. They perhaps weren't being assessed through the school district, didn't have special education services in place. So a lot of that is what we saw, or what I saw in my years in the county attorney's office.
Okay.
And I think it's very similar to what Senator Dungan had been talking about earlier as well.
The other question I had, just quick to follow up, is one thing I'm concerned about with these truancy laws is that, say it does bring a kid or a family into the system, and then they can get the support or services that they might need to address the problems at home and kind of reset their trajectory and get back on track. One thing that I'm worried about is that some of the feedback that I'm hearing is that once an individual basically utilizes an opportunity for diversion, they don't have that later if they come into contact with law enforcement for something else. So say they were to perhaps miss, you know, school and end up utilizing a diversion program for truancy, and then, I don't know, later they get an MIP or something of that nature, then they don't have the same availability to kind of utilize the diversion program. Do you know how Douglas County does that, or have you seen any sort of kind of unintended consequences from that may impact people if they have, you know, future issues? And I just would like to know more about how the diversion program works.
Yeah, I think I can definitely speak to when I was there. I don't know, you know,
Okay.
if things have changed currently, but I think that is based on the kid and it's based on the county attorney individually.
Okay.
And I think a lot of, when I was making those decisions in my cases, I was considering how close this charge was, the severity of the charge, how well that child did, how engaged they were when they were in diversion, because typically we would get some sort of report showing, they have met with us on these days, they've done these services, et cetera, and they're being successfully discharged. Obviously, if they didn't utilize the juvenile assessment
Right.
center, that was a different story. But I don't know what the current stance on that is, but I can say that if they were successful once, I don't know that it would always be off the table in the future, just depending on the circumstances.
That's helpful. Did most of the kids or families that you were working with in truancy cases have lawyers on the other side to represent them?
Yeah, so even as it stands today, kids are appointed attorneys, and yes, as ERC counsel, we're typically working with the parents, the education decision maker, and then as a prosecutor, I was working with defense attorney to work with that family and see if we could alleviate that problem.
Right. No, that's super helpful. And I think that everybody's committed to accountability and personal responsibility. I think that the concern for me and what I'm hearing from my constituents is just how that system interaction can provide sometimes lifelong consequences in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of resetting the trajectory, it kind of sends the family into a tailspin and it's
Well,
hard to get out.
And hopefully with this bill, we would alleviate the need for diversion, right? I mean, hopefully we could alleviate and address these concerns up front in the school setting, rather than county attorney receiving a referral and moving down the road. So,
Very good. Thanks.
yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Linehan?
Thank you, Chairman Murman. So in your second page of your testimony, 231 has no fiscal note. There's no additional cost to state school districts already receive funding to engage in what is called child find. I don't know what that is.
Federal law for the schools to ensure that they are making sure that their students are receiving services if necessary. If they're aware that a child has a diagnosis, they're holding a 504 meeting. If they're aware that a child has a medical diagnosis, perhaps screening for the multidisciplinary process to see if they would verify for an IEP, those sorts of things.
So you're talking about the funding then is IDEA funding? Is that the funding or is there other funding?
I believe so. Yes, IDEA.
Okay,
IDEA, sorry.
that's okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Any other questions? I have one.
Sure.
I don't know if I heard you right. You said the truant individual is always represented by a lawyer?
In juvenile court, yes.
Okay. And
In
that's-
my early days in the county attorney's office, they were not always appointed, status offenses were not always appointed attorneys. It's my understanding that that is not the case anymore, at least in Douglas County. I can speak to that, but yes.
And that's provided by the county then?
Typically court appointed, yes, if the family meets that need.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Murman and members of the Education Committee. My name is Kyle McGowan, KYLE-MCGOWAN, and today I'm representing the Nebraska Council of School Administrators. We support LB 231 as it describes what's best practice regarding student attendance issues, and probably is already taking place in most schools in Nebraska. Student attendance definitely has an impact on learning, and research certainly shows that it makes a difference. Under the current law, all school boards are required to have a written policy on attendance and it's developed annually and reviewed in collaboration with the county attorney. The policy must include provisions indicating how the school district will address cases in which excessive absences are due to illness. Policy must also state the circumstances and number of absences or the hourly equivalent upon which the school shall render all the services to address barriers in attendance. LB 231 stipulates that such services must be provided after the 20 days of absences and must include written, not only verbal, communication by the school officials with the person or persons who have legal or actual charge of the child. The results of the meetings would be developed in a collaborative plan to reduce the barriers identified to improve regular attendance. Under LB 231, the plan must include, if agreed to by the person who is responsible for making these decisions on behalf of the child, an educational evaluation to determine whether any intellectual, academic, physical, or social emotional barriers are contributing to the lack of attendance. This additional accountability by the school to require written communication assures clear messaging and may actually assist if further actions needed by the district or the county attorney. We are all about having kids in school. Thank you, Senator Dungan.
Any questions for Kyle McGowan? If not, thank you very much. Any other proponents for LB 231?
Good afternoon again, Chairperson Murman and members of the Education Committee. My name is Anais Salazar, A-N-A-H-I-S-A-L-A-Z-A-R, and I am representing Voices for Children in Nebraska. Education is necessary for children's development into healthy and productive adults. Attending school is one of the several factors that impact children's educational success. Efforts to ensure attendance are important, but most focus on resolving obstacles to attendance for children and families in a supportive manner. For these reasons, we support LB 231, which creates a more extensive plan for students and families when they are absent for 20 or more days. Student success and positive educational outcomes are important to the future of Nebraska, and research supports the association between high rates of absenteeism and poor educational outcomes. Nebraska statute currently states that if the child has been absent more than 20 days, the school shall notify family and the county attorney. In order to better help students and families, LB 231 adds an educational evaluation with permission of the educational decision maker to better help schools identify if intellectual, academic, physical, or social emotional barriers are adding to the student's successive absences. Social anxiety is one of the biggest reasons students are absent from school. Close behind are academic struggles and being bullied. If students feel like they are not understanding content or are afraid of their peers, their enthusiasm for school dwindles and they may try to stay home. Students with ADHD, autism, or developmental delays are twice as likely to have excessive absences. By conducting an evaluation, schools are better able to help students by providing opportunities for intervention, identifying any disabilities that can be accommodated to resolve the attendance, and allowing for reteaching and enrichment. For all these reasons, we thank Senator Dungan for bringing this bill and thank the committee for considering this important matter. We respectfully urge you to advance LB 231, and I am available to try and answer any questions.
Any questions for Anais Salazar? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other proponents for LB 231? Any other proponents? Any opponents for LB 231? Anyone wish to testify in neutral position? If not, Senator Dungan, you're welcome to close. He waives closing, so that'll end the hearing for LB 231. Well, first I should say we have 1 proponent letter, 7 opponent letters, 0 neutral. And that'll end the hearing for LB 231. And we'll open the hearing for LB 386, Senator Linehan.
Take your time.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Murman and members of the Education Committee. My name is Luann Linehan, L-O-U-A-N-N-L-I-N-E-H-A-N, and I'm from Legislative District 39, which includes Elkhorn and Waterloo in Douglas County. Today, I'm introducing LB 386. LB 386 would prevent changes to the TIOSA base limit and local effort rate calculation. The bill would affect school districts and political subdivisions other than, I think it affects school districts. That's what happens when you don't read this before you start. This act will also require that the legislature make no changes to the base limit and local effort rate calculation. I'm concerned that TIOSA could be abused, that it would increase funding for schools without going through So, new staff, and I took the weekend off. Here's the reason I introduced this bill. There has been, when I first got here, and historically, there has been a lot of tinkering with the LER and the base limit. So when you hear schools concerned that they don't know about trusting us on funding, it's because in times past, the LER has been at $1. And when we were short on money, we moved it up to $1.02 or $1.03, and we messed with the other lever. I'm just saying that we shouldn't mess with the levers. They are what they are, and we should fully fund TIOSA.
Thank you. Any questions for Senator Linehan?
Go ahead.
Senator Wayne.
Did you just say fully fund TIOSA?
Yes,
Oh, okay. That just caught me off guard.
which we have done for the last, I think, 5 years.
Any other questions for Senator Linehan? Okay. Any opponents for LB 380, or proponents for LB 386? Any proponents for LB 386? Any opponents for LB 386? Anyone wish to testify in the neutral position for LB 386? Hey, Senator Linehan, you're welcome to close. She waves closing. We have one proponent letter, 0 opponent, 0 neutral. And that'll close the hearing for LB 386. And we'll move to LB 455, Senator Wayne.
Good afternoon, Chairman Murman and members of the Education Committee. My name is Justin Wayne, JUSTINWAYNE, and I represent Legislative District 13. While my hearing won't be as short as the last one, it'll be just as exciting. Nebraska, the good life. You know, those actually start with one thing and one thing only. That's really to be able to read. Like, really, in order to read, it is a requirement for us to live in the Nebraska good life. LB 455 is intended to help provide a positive educational experience for K-12 students that impact reading scores and literacy rates and improve lifelong learning skills and potential of Nebraska youth and their families. Last September, I was shown copies of printed grade publications that our envelope was handed out with some of the same material. With the goals of improving reading scores and literacy rates in Nebraska. It published monthly by the Nebraska Press Association, and over 12,000 copies are distributed to 600 classrooms, grades 3, 4, and 5 in nearly 100 school districts in 27 counties in Nebraska. It is now funded by private donations and fundraising, but this type of publication should be in all grade schools statewide. It is very important that this is a non-digital product. It is a printed publication that is colorful, creative, interactive, and draws on the intention and focus of the students. It means less screen time and less chances that we have to redirect people from learning and non-learning and being on the internet. LB 455 would appropriate $1.17 million of general funds for the fiscal year 2023-24, $1.17 million of general funds for the fiscal year 24-25 to get a statewide distribution in place by September of this year. With the trend of reading scores and literacy scores in Nebraska declining, which is also disturbing, I think this is one way that we can help improve reading by getting kids excited about reading. We all know what happens when young kids can't read. Life outcomes are strained and sometimes can end up in what I have to deal with in judiciary. We know prison is kind of directly related to reading scores. So there'll be people behind me who will speak in more detail about the publication and how they distribute it. But I just, you all have copies of this material. I just think it's a low-cost bill that can impact a lot of kids. And with that, I will answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for them? Senator Wayne, Senator Linehan.
Thank you, Chairman Murman. I think you were here, Senator Wayne, when it was Senator Dungan's bill that was introduced a little bit ago, LB 231, and Ms. McClellan said that one of the problems with kids who don't go to school, I'll read just from it. The child who hasn't been taught to read cannot understand the work and is so far behind in school that they feel there is no point going on.
That is 100%. So actually, she was one of the better prosecutors that I always worked with in Douglas County. So I wanted to give her a shout out in case she goes back over there and have to represent the people. But no, she was, many of the kids that we dealt with in Truity also had reading problems. And so reading is one of the fundamental things that we have to have. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Senator Wayne? If not, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Proponents for LB 455.
Good afternoon, Chairman Murman and members of the Education Committee. My name is Terry, Terri Sanders, Sanders, and I am the publisher of the Omaha Star newspaper located in North Omaha. We're the only African-American newspaper in the state of Nebraska, founded July the 9th, 1938. To date, we have never missed a publication date since our first issue 85 years ago. Our community-published newspaper shares global news, not just North Omaha information. The Omaha Star is a member of the Nebraska Press Association and the National Newspaper Publishers Association. I am here today to testify as a proponent of LB 455. The key is to help improve reading scores and to increase literacy in our communities statewide for both children and adults. Everyone who can read will have a better outcome in life. We know that minority students have lower reading scores than non-minority students, and that students living in poverty are more likely to be illiterate than students living in above poverty level areas. These challenges are all across the state of Nebraska, not just in one county, city, or community. Senator Wayne's bill, LB 455, helps to take publications statewide and addresses reading scores and literacy rates for all Nebraskans. Currently, the Omaha Star receives and distributes 1,000 copies of Kids Scoop News and distributes those copies to schools in North Omaha of both public and private elementary schools. When received at the schools, it is a welcome addition to the curriculum. It is enjoyed by both teachers and students. The Omaha Star also distributed copies of this publication during the Christmas in the Village community celebration, which meant that that publication went straight into the homes of students. A continual improvement in the reading scores and increased literacy rates in my community means a better prepared citizen in the state of Nebraska and not just North Omaha. Reading scores and literacy rates in North Omaha area were some of the lowest in the state pre-COVID. The disruption caused by COVID has widened the gap even further, and LB 455 helps with programs and efforts on the front end of the learning spectrum, where the biggest positive impact on learning and life skills can be made. We know the current path and trajectory of Nebraskans who are illiterate are not positive and can lead to other social issues attributed to illiteracy. Senator Wayne's bill, LB 454, is one small step to help address the problem of illiteracy so our youth have every opportunity to break the cycle, so they learn and lead productive and better lives. I would like to thank you for your time, and it is my hope that this bill will move out of the committee to be passed.
Thank you. Any questions for Terry Sanders? Senator Sanders?
No relation.
Maybe.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you for your testimony. I think I saw you featured on Black History Month and the history of the newspaper. So
yes,
on
KMTV on Monday.
Yes, thank you for that. Is there an online version and or an app that would be available?
Well, for the Omaha Star, there is an online version. I am not sure about Kids Scoop. You'd have to address that with the Nebraska Press Association.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Chairman Murray. Thank you for your testimony here to date. So currently, Nebraska Press Association publishes this
Publishes Kids Scoop, yes.
and, or Kids Scoop, yeah, and distributes it to yourself and other
And other
newspapers, and they
publications.
distribute it to the schools.
Correct.
Will this bill, and currently Nebraska Press stands the cost of this apparently.
Yes, they do.
Would this bill expand the reach of, for example, Kids Scoop News, or simply help out Nebraska Press to?
No, it would expand the reach because it is my understanding that this would then be distributed throughout the state with the support of this bill, undergirding the cost of publication, which can be expensive.
Okay.
Paper and ink is not cheap.
Okay, what percent of the state or what percent of students have access to this now? Do we have any idea? Or did somebody say?
Someone else will be able to answer that. I just know how our paper distributes it in the city of Omaha.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just would like to answer your question. Hello, and thank you, Chairman Dave Murman and members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Heather Gill. It's Heather, Gill, Gill. I'm here to speak on behalf of LB 455 and the possibility of monthly publication distributed to classrooms across Nebraska. Currently, we've been working this past year, we have 12,000 students, 3rd through 5th grade, that are receiving it. To fully represent Nebraska would be 80,000 copies, and that's what we've been working towards. I've spent the past 28 years learning from kids, families, providers, teachers, and community leaders as an educator, pastor, home visitor, community developer, and systems coach to public and private schools, childcare, and state agencies in Nebraska. Being in dozens of classrooms and schools and hearing the experiences of teachers and families across our state has given me kind of a unique perspective, I think, on our Nebraskans, and a very strong belief that engaged families and communities partnering with teachers and schools, they will do whatever it takes for the children in their community. Saying all of this, raising readers, learners, and critical thinkers is essential for all of our future in Nebraska. And currently, we know that our reading scores need to be improved. Recognizing the need for improved reading scores in Nebraska, I think right now is prime opportunity to provide really practical resources and strategies for our state. We know that what we practice grows stronger, and the more we read, the better we read, and the more confident we are. We also know that our kids need a large variety of print material that is interesting and that they want to read. Kids Scoop News is very adaptable, flexible, and open-ended. It gives families and schools an opportunity to be able to utilize it in a way that's best for it. I can tell you, kids are coming to school right now without print experience, with very limited print experience, with very limited access to a book. So many of the homes that I worked in when I was a home visitor, they didn't have any print material available for the kids to explore, play with, manipulate. The other thing that I'm really concerned about, I've just moved to the east. I was over in Ogallala, Senator Murman, and something I was thinking about is I was in a 2nd grade classrooms. Kids were not able to turn the paper pages because they have had such limited exposure to print material, books, reading material, which that's a pre-literacy skill that needs to happen before kids ever enter school. Many students lack essential fine motor skills, experiences within the schools. Our OTs and PTs are very concerned about this because we know that kids learn to read because they want to learn to read because they're experiencing all of the material. We also know that teachers' lives and days are filled with required activities due to increased mandates. We know that we can partner with them, not as one more thing to do, but a way to come alongside with them and help them, give them ready-made. If you looked at the document that we've shared with you, the publication, they can use it for a large variety of things that they can do with this document. My daughter-in-law teaches here, and one of the things she uses it for is just different ways for different learners to read and be interested in the paper. It's more experiential, hands-on for some of our kids. That makes a bigger difference. Secondly, I think Kids Scoop News will provide us an opportunity for family and community engagement. I believe strongly that family and community engagement remains the key to all of our academic and social success. I also believe that engagement is the key to motivation. It takes engagement for people to want to do this. And so engaging our students and families is going to help motivate us to read. I think bringing people together is a very important part of Kids Scoop News. I was at Custer County Fair and spoke with hundreds of people going through the fairgrounds around this. And many, many people are concerned about literacy and they want to know what they can do. Some practical strategies, some practical resources that we can just give them and help them begin to know what to do. One thing that our
Excuse me, you do have the red light, but I'll let you continue a little longer.
I knew that was going to happen. Okay, one last thing. 5 minutes is a very short time. Okay, if afterwards, if you'd like to know some of the ways that we've been partnering with communities to this point, ask me. Conversation is a way that we come together to make changes happen. Change isn't going to happen without conversation. And I believe that newspapers have been that voice for us. They've listened to our community voices, they share information, and I believe they're the perfect bridge to bridge that literacy and engagement gap. I've been working in schools, working with truancy, working with kids involved in the system for a very long time. I know that reading and bringing families together around reading will impact our state in a very powerful way. If you have questions, sorry, I knew I was going to do that. I even brought my phone this time.
Any questions for Heather Gill? Senator Albright.
Thank you, Chairman Murman, and thanks, Ms. Gill, for your enthusiasm for reading. This is exciting. I did receive the scoop quite a while ago. I have 14 grandchildren. They do love to read. And one of them, I can just kind of tell you, he hit 1 million words. I mean, again, turning those pages in a book, turning them in a, and I also say up in the rural areas of our state, I mean, people read these papers front and back. They know everything that's going on in their communities. And but you're saying 3rd through 5th grade is where you're kind of concentrating right now?
We've been targeting 3rd through 5th grade with we're exploring, looking at some younger levels. Some of our smaller schools did do just experiential and took it into some of the younger grades as well.
Yeah. So,
but they
and
get it
what were you
monthly.
referring to with the 80,000 copies?
So in Nebraska, there's 80,000 students that are 3rd through 5th grade.
80,000, but you're only
so
at 12,000 at this point.
We have 12,000 at this point. And we've got, we've been visiting schools all the way across Nebraska, Scottsbluff, up to Chagrin, all the way across Nebraska. And it's very needed. It's a monthly publication. If you've looked at it, it's.
And just real quick, the content, where do you get the content for these papers?
We have Kids Scoop News is written, developed by a person out of out of California, and her name is Vicki. She develops our content for us with in collaboration with the Nebraska Press, and then they've worked out all of the demographics that I don't understand.
Well, it's exciting, and any, $1,500 that the governor would like to give every child, it'd be nice if they could pay for their paper with that, but that's just me. So thank you for being here, for so much enthusiasm for reading.
Well, and if you have questions or you'd like more information on what we've done to this point, we've done some exciting things.
Any other questions? I've just got a comment too. When I was a young fella a long time ago, I think we had a weekly reader, if I remember right. That's what it was called. And I really liked that little paper. I liked reading it. And it does engage families because I think counting electronic papers and all the newspapers across my large district, I think I get at least 10 or a dozen, and it engages families because my wife really gets upset with me. She thinks I spend too much time reading the newspapers.
Yes, that's.
Any other questions? Sorry, if you wanted to make a comment.
I could talk all day about the subject and how it would impact our kids.
Yeah, I appreciate your enthusiasm.
Quiet. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Senator Murman, members of the Education Committee. My name is Dennis DeRosset. That's DENNIS DEROSSETT. I serve as the Executive Director of the Nebraska Press Association and the Nebraska Press Association Foundation. Nebraska Press represents all 150 newspapers across Nebraska, and our foundation, which is a 501c3, its mission is focused on education and scholarships. We're here today, obviously, to be a strong proponent of LB 455. We want to thank Senator Wayne for taking time last September to meet with us just to learn about our efforts to reach and help students across Nebraska with the publication that we had been publishing called Kids Scoop News. We especially thank him for his vision that spurred LB 455. Which again, we strongly support. In 2021, we were looking at how we could engage our newspapers across the state with their communities and their schools. Traditionally, newspapers have had newspaper and education programs. Those have sort of waned over the years. And we wanted to find a way, again, to connect the newspapers with the schools. We were aware of Kids Scoop News as a product. The creator and owner of this product is from Nebraska and happens to live now in Sonoma, California. This project, we were the first state to do this project as a tabloid statewide. In the state. We don't go statewide. Some newspapers, I think there's about 300 newspapers who run a feature in the pages of the paper once a month. But in September 21, we launched this monthly publication targeted strictly to grades 3, 4, and 5. We learned that third grade is a pivotal year for literacy development. It's known that it's time when students transition from learning to read to reading to learn. And also from that point forward, over 80% of the curriculum is taught by reading. So I hope each of you had an opportunity to see the publication and to look through it. Since we started it, we've heard continual positive feedback from teachers and students. Teachers tell us they love anything that encourages reading, especially in students who are reluctant to read. A large part of that is because Kids Scoop News is a printed product, not a digital format. It's useful in the classroom, and it can be taken home and shared as a family activity. The family aspect is one of the primary reasons the content is in both English and Spanish. The purpose of our program is to awaken the magic of reading in students by making reading fun and enjoyable. to have a long-term positive impact on reading scores and literacy rates in Nebraska. This translates to a higher rate of literacy and, as we know, improved lifelong skills, abilities, and accomplishments. So I'll go over some of the stats again that have been stated here, but we started with about 12,000 copies, and most of that is in Northeast Nebraska now. So I think we cover Senator Breezy's district, Senator Albrecht, Senator Murman, some of your area. I'm not sure that we're too much in Senator Sanders' Linehan yet, and we're not in Lincoln yet. The idea is to go statewide, but we've done this so far with funding from our own foundation and from private gifts and gifts from other foundations. We target those, like I say, and it's about 16 to 24 pages a month. There's a parent's guide that is published at least quarterly to be taken home, so it's showed how to be used in the family. And we also have a teacher's guide that's available to the teachers, to where it basically gives them lesson plans for using the content in their classroom. Current distribution, again, 600 classrooms, 100 school districts, 27 counties, mainly in the Northeast. Part of that was logistics, but we also go down into Falls City area. We go into McCook, we go into Broken Bow, and that's because of enthusiastic publishers who just had to have this in their area. Their schools saw it, they wanted it, and we put it there. So the goal is to be statewide, which LB 455 would enable. We'll have a special statewide issue, by the way, in May, thanks to a private donation. And the special content in that one will be 8-page section of the 24 pages will be a history of the Homestead Act and all about the Homestead National Monument in Beatrice. So a couple of the things I wanted to point out. So instead of newspaper and education, we actually see this as an education outreach program. Parents and teachers are looking for activities to get their children, I'm sorry, sir, I didn't see the red.
No, that's all right. If you can
I'll sum it up.
Continue kind of quickly.
Okay, one of the things that got our initial interest in this was it was an article in Forbes magazine that said that in a certain state, when they projected the number of prison beds they needed 10 years down the road, they looked at 4th grade reading scores. Now, that has been refuted as a statistic, but this was in Forbes magazine. But there's no question that illiteracy and the rates of incarceration are connected. So we are trying to help reading. Reading is fundamental to all of us, to our industry. These kids are going to be not only our customers, our readers, but they're our community leaders, and they're the future of Nebraska. So we think this bill helps. This is a tool. It's not the answer, but it's one of the tools. And again, we appreciate the testimony from Terry Sanders, Heather Gill, and appreciate Senator Wayne. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dennis Barisick?
Thank you, Chairman Wayne. Thank you for your testimony here today. So you would anticipate trying to access this potential grant program that we're talking about putting in place here. Do you know how many dollars you would need annually to make this work, or how many dollars would you want to access?
We would need more than this bill would provide, because we would be going not only to the schools, but we want to go to public schools, the private schools, after school programs, wherever we can get this into the hands of students. Right now, it would be 9 months out of the year, but we would look at going 12 months out of the year. So it would go in the non-school months to possibly libraries, after-school programs, just to keep the activity in front of the students. I don't have a final number yet.
Sure. But you would anticipate accessing this entire amount and still relying on private sources or your foundation?
Yes, the amount that we would get from other sources would help with the scope of what we would be able to do, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Senator Albrecht.
Thank you, Chairman Murman, and thank you for being here. So this publication only comes out once a month?
Once a month.
Okay, and could you get us a number before we would exec on something like this, on the dollars that you would see if you were to be able to do all that you wanted to do?
Yes,
Just give us an idea.
yes,
Thank you.
we can do that.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Any other proponents for LB 455?
Good afternoon, Chairman Murman, members of the Education Committee. For the record, my name is Corby Gilbertson. It's spelled KorbyGilbertson. I'm appearing today as a registered lobbyist on behalf of Media of Nebraska Incorporated in support of LB 455. Media of Nebraska does not publish newspapers. We represent both print and broadcast media across the state, mainly in First Amendment issues, public records, open meetings laws. But we looked at this piece of legislation and thought it was something that was really important for the legislature to consider, given the fact that it opens students' eyes to other ways to get information. I think we all agree that there's a lot of people that get most of their information from social media, and this maybe gives kids and their families a time to take a step back and look at different ways to gain that information. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? If not, thanks a lot.
Great, thank you.
Any other proponents for LB 455? Any opponents for LB 455? Anyone wish to testify in a neutral position? And online, we have 2 proponents, 5 opponents, 0 neutral. And that'll close the hearing for LB 455. And we'll open the hearing for LB 705.
Okay. Okay, Senator Murman will open on LB 705.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Albright. My name is Dave Murman. I'm here to introduce LB 705, the lottery bill. The lottery fund is the only fund that the Education Committee has to spend at its discretion. This committee is tasked with reallocating the funds from the lottery towards educational grants, services, or programs in conjunction with the proper administrators. I must caution members of the committee that there are a lot of good pieces in this bill, but this bill does need a lot of work. The draft before you does not include the appropriate funds for the Coordinating Commission on Post-Secondary Education to carry out the administration of these duties as assigned. So we will be working in executive session to amend this. Mike Baumgartner, the Executive Director of the Coordinating Commission, reached out to my office, and we will continue to work with the commission to fix this issue. I have also had contact with Lincoln Public Schools about LB 705. They have requested an amendment that would allow them to use some of these funds for an after-school program, which we are continuing to look into. If you take a look at the handout I have provided, you can see where the funds are going as the bill is currently written. Undoubtedly, we will have to make some adjustments, but I emphasize that all of these programs are for the benefit of Nebraska schools, teachers, and students. We have several people here that are going to testify to the benefit of many of these programs. I want to thank Senator Walls and her former Education Legal Counsel, Elsa Knight, for their diligent work on this project. I welcome any questions, and I'll be here to close.
Thank you, Senator Murman. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. We'll take proponents. Hi.
Hello, good afternoon. Chairman Murman, Vice Chairman Albright. Thank you for bringing this bill, Senator. My name is Mike Baumgartner, Mikebaumgartner. I'm the Executive Director of the Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education, and I am here today to testify in support of LB 705. College affordability is a defining issue of our time as we seek to build up the knowledge and skills of our workforce to match the needs of the economy. Lottery funds for post-secondary education are a crucial source of support for Nebraska's multi-pronged affordability strategies And LB 705 directs lottery funds in a strategic manner to improve affordability and meet workforce needs in Nebraska. I'll go over several of the programs that are administered by the Coordinating Commission. The Nebraska Opportunity Grant provides need-based financial aid to Nebraska undergraduates attending Nebraska colleges and universities. Although comparatively small nationwide, the Nebraska Opportunity Grant is a successful program that serves Nebraska students across all sectors. In 21-22, 13,188 students received awards averaging $1,721. Unfortunately, 15,655 eligible students did not receive an award because there's not enough funding for the program. Total appropriations for FY23 are $24 million, $7.6 million from general funds and $16.4 million from lottery funds. Maintaining the 62% distribution of lottery funds for NOG is the Coordinating Commission's highest priority for lottery funds, and that will provide between $13.5 and $14 million per year. We are currently spending above what we take in each year to reduce a balance, but we're only able to maintain that level through about FY27. So the 62% will remain very important. Community College Gap Assistance Program is targeted to 13 occupational fields that have been identified as in demand in statute. It can only be used by Nebraska residents with incomes at or below 250% of poverty level for non-credit or short-term programs that are not covered by other financial aid programs such as Pell Grants and Nebraska Opportunity Grants. Today, there are 326 approved programs at our community colleges in the 13 demand occupational areas. The GAP program currently receives about $1.9 million each year from the Education Improvement Fund, which exceeds annual expenditures, which have been about $1.1 million per year. Under LB 705, the GAP program will receive 7% of lottery funds, or approximately $1.5 million per year. While the GAP program is still reaching its potential, it is an important addition to the state's affordability arsenal. Career readiness and dual credit education. Nebraska recognizes the importance of dual enrollment courses for promoting early access to college in career and technical fields and in general education, and it's currently providing $8 million per year to reduce tuition for dual enrollment courses. The reduced tuition is having a strong impact on demand. However, there are issues with the numbers of instructors available to teach the courses. The Higher Learning Commission, which accredits colleges and universities in Nebraska, requires a master's degree in a content-specific field or a master's in a different field and 18 graduate credit hours in the content-specific field to teach college-level courses. That leaves many potential dual enrollment instructors on the sideline. This new grant program would have a significant issue on teacher preparation as we address that issue by providing funding for them to get those graduate credits. The Door to College Scholarship would provide about $5,000 to students who graduate from an accredited high school program at a YRTC or graduate from a Nebraska high school within 1 year of discharge from YRTC. It's a good day to have that program in front of you, given the number of bills you've listened to already. The program recognizes that justice system-involved youths often have additional barriers to overcome to achieve a college credential or degree. The state will benefit greatly from helping these students prepare for high-wage, high-skill, and high-demand jobs in Nebraska. Finally, I'll conclude with excellence in teaching, critical for our teacher preparation programs. As Senator Murman mentioned, right now, the bill would transfer administration of that program to the Coordinating Commission. We are willing and able to take that administrative responsibility, but there's no funding for it currently in the program, so I will commit it to you for the rejiggering that will need to be done at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Baumgartner. That's a lot of information that we'll have to go back over. But you did a good job putting it all together. Does anybody have any questions? Senator Linehan.
Thanks, Vice Chairman Albright. On page 3, and I know we've discussed this before, but how could we speed up the number of instructors who could do dual course?
We need to help them out with getting those graduate credit hours because there is not much of an incentive other than wanting to be a great teacher to get those hours after you've gotten a master's degree. If you don't climb up the salary schedule for that and the hours are outside of a graduate degree you've already gotten, then it really falls on you or on your school district to do something about it. So I think that UNO, for instance, has a number of certificates that are oriented to the most high demand programs. They already offer those online. The teachers still need to pay for those credits. I know that OPS right now has some programs using their federal stimulus funds to help their teachers get those credit hours, but that's certainly not statewide. So taking a look at what they're doing, building on that, building more of those programs in areas like English or math or physics or computer science or in health, and finding quick ways to get the students to those graduate credits, to the 18 credits, or incentivizing them to get the master's in those particular subject areas. So right now, you can get a curriculum and instruction master's degree, but it won't have the 18 graduate credit hours in a specific field. So that would be like getting a master's and getting more. But if those can be combined into specific programs, or if we can get them into these shorter term 6-course sequences, then we'll be able to get teachers prepared.
Could you put that in writing?
Yeah.
Thank you. Senator Linehan, thank you for answering. Any other questions? Okay, I have a few.
Okay.
Because this is my first year in education, so nice to meet you. I've never met you face to face, heard your name a lot. So can you talk about what you also provided for us? And you're saying you don't have any money for 2023 to fund just a certain program or to?
The money that I mentioned that is not included in the bill would be for the Excellence in Teaching Act. That program is currently administered by the Nebraska Department of Education. There are two components to it, the attracting excellence to teaching and the enhancing excellence to teaching. One is a pre-teaching loan, forgivable loan. The other is a forgivable loan for teachers who are teaching who want to get a master's degree. Those programs currently get 8% of the lottery funds, but in the bill as it's written, that was unfortunately left out and needs to be added. So that's the one that's not going to be funded.
Okay, so if
unless
it's
it's
left
fixed.
out and needs to be funded, how do you get the money into the?
It would need to come from
request
some of the
from-
other programs.
Okay, so they have to find it and
Yeah.
get it
Yeah.
covered. So this other sheet that you gave us is
Yep.
just information only?
Information on the Nebraska Opportunity Grant and information on the Community College Gap Assistance Program. I didn't provide you with anything on the Enhancing or the Excellence in Teaching Act because that is administered by the Department of Education right now. They do have handouts for that, and and see if there's, yeah, they'll be able to take care of that. So that's not our
Okay,
program
perfect.
yet
Okay,
at this
very
point.
good.
So this is background information on the ones that we have.
Very good. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. So any other questions? Seeing none, thanks for being here. Proponents?
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Albrecht, members of the Education Committee. For the record, my name is Heath Mello, Heathmello. I serve as the University of Nebraska System Vice President for External Relations, and I'm appearing today as a registered lobbyist on behalf of the university system in support of LB 705. We want to thank Chairman Murman for introducing and Senator Walz for co-sponsoring this proposal to reauthorize lottery funding for the Nebraska Opportunity Grant, or better known as the NOG program, and other key higher education and training programs. The Nebraska Opportunity Grant Program is our state's only need-based financial aid program that provides direct assistance to qualified Pell-eligible Nebraska residents to attend the college or university of their choice. Close to 6,000 students enrolled at the University of Nebraska system, including the Nebraska College of Technical Agriculture, received a NOG grant out of roughly 13,000 students statewide in 2022. The NOG program's state lottery funding is vital in ensuring that accessibility and affordability remain a cornerstone of Nebraska's higher education systems. However, there is still a significant need from students, specifically first-generation students, who are otherwise limited in their ability to pay for higher education. In 2022, the University of Nebraska system had roughly 5,000 students who qualified for the Nebraska Opportunity Grant Program, but were unable to receive an award due to the lack of available funding. While this data reinforces the need for additional need-based financial aid funding, without the Nebraska Opportunity Grants lottery funding in LB 705, the impact would be considerably worse, both for the university and the 6,000 students at our campuses who do receive this critical assistance. Lastly, while we support the reauthorization of lottery funding for the NOG and LB 705, we do have serious concerns about the complete elimination of lottery funding for the Excellence in Teaching Scholarship Program. This program provides loans to post-secondary students who are pursuing a degree in shortage areas to complete a teacher education program and commit to teaching at a Nebraska public or private K-12 school. We encourage the committee to find a sustainable funding stream to maintain this critical teacher workforce development program. On behalf of the University of Nebraska system, our 4 campuses and nearly 50,000 students, I'd like to once again thank Senator Murman for introducing LB 705 and the Education Committee for their past support of the NOG program, and reiterate that we look forward to working with the committee on moving forward with the needed lottery reauthorization package. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Mello. Any questions? Senator Linehan?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Albright. You read that so fast, I'm trying to find. You didn't talk about the Nebraska promise, even though it's in your.
I timed this slightly at a little longer than 3 minutes, so I had to cut a paragraph, Senator.
So would you go to that paragraph?
I would. You know, the formal testimony here says from the establishment of the Nebraska Promise in 2020 to our recent 2-year tuition freeze through the end of the fiscal year, the University of Nebraska system remains steadfast and committed to a mission of accessibility and affordability through strong leadership and public-private partnerships.
So Nebraska Promise Program, which waives tuition for under, I can't remember.
$65,000.
$65,000. But then do you use these programs to help pay for that tuition?
So the Nebraska Promise Program is a last dollar in tuition assistance program after a student receives Pell funding, as well as Nebraska Opportunity Grant funding, as well as any other private scholarship. The university covers the remaining amount of their tuition bill after other financial aids considered.
So how many students, and this, I expect you to know this, but how many students do you think are attending the UN system now under Nebraska?
About 7,500.
And do we know the number of those that are first generation students?
I can get that. I can try to get that information to you, Senator. It's first generation data is self-reported, so it's not a standardized thing, but we can get you the self-reported data we do have on those students.
And then on your concerns about the Excellence in Teacher Scholarship Program, is this the one that they use to go back? Okay, they've already got their bachelor's and they go back to get their master's?
It's the same. Our concern was the same concern raised by Dr. Baumgartner at the end of the day. It's a program that it's a attraction program for undergraduate students to go into teaching, as well as existing teachers who are looking to get their master's degree. So the reality is both programs are utilized by students, graduate and undergraduate students. Once again, similar to what Senator Albright's question was, I'm not here to suggest the funding stream. We just hope that you continue to find a way to fund that teacher recruitment and retention program.
If they're going for grad school to get their master's, is there does it help to, so I'm trying to follow up. You get your master's, but you could still, how many hours do you have to have a master's?
Usually it's about 36.
So couldn't 18 of those hours be so they could be a dual credit teacher?
I would be remiss. I probably shouldn't speak to that specific aspect. I can look into it, but I know the dual credit component in the bill, LB 705, is a new concept to provide K-12 teachers their ability to get their
Right, because we have a
endorsement.
lot of high school kids, but we don't have enough teachers. So could you, working with Mr. Baumgartner, try and help us figure out how we can help shrink the shortage of dual education teachers if we use these programs?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? None? Come on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You want to attempt it? All righty, next proponent.
Actually, Senator Linehan beat me to it. I was going to ask about Nebraska Promise.
Hi.
Hello. Vice Chairman Albright, members of the Education Committee, my name is Ben Welsh, BenWelsch. I'm here today to speak on behalf of the Nebraska State Education Association and represent the 28,000 NSCA members in support of LB 705. Senator Murman suggested edits to LB 705, so our support is contingent on funding being fully restored by committee amendment to the Excellent in Teaching Cash Fund. So again, what's been brought up earlier about this part being missing from LB 705, hopefully I'll also be able to answer Senator Albright's question about how should the funding be allotted, because you'll notice in my testimony, we have a sample set up for percentages that we would suggest the committee look at to try to reinstate that excellent in teaching cash fund from the past. Funding is currently set in statute to be 8% of the lottery proceeds, but in the green copy of LB 705, this funding was stricken. We hope this is just an oversight when the bill was drafted, and I'm here today to discuss the need for such funding for our educators. We have a continuing teacher staffing crisis in Nebraska. There's a shortage of teachers in the state. More than 1,000 teachers have left the state's 2 largest school districts since the pandemic began in 2020. Omaha Public Schools reported 239 teachers left in 19 to 20, while 320 teachers in 20 and 21. Lincoln Public Schools saw 251 teachers leave from 19 to 20 and 241 in 2021. In order to reverse this trend, we need to incentivize young people to enter the teaching profession. We need to provide more scholarships and loan forgiveness programs for students being trained in our teacher colleges. Currently, there are 2 active state-sponsored educator loan forgiveness programs in Nebraska. The first one, Attracting Excellent to the Teacher Program, provides forgivable loans to eligible students who are enrolled in an undergraduate or graduate teacher education program at an eligible Nebraska institution working towards his or her initial certificate to teach in Nebraska. Eligible students may apply on an annual basis for the AETP loan in an amount of $3,000 and can apply for and receive these loans annually for up to 5 consecutive years. In return for receiving these loans, the student agrees to complete the teacher education program that he or she is currently enrolled in and commits to becoming certified and to teach full-time in an accredited or approved public or private school in Nebraska. And if the student meets the loan forgiveness obligations, loans will be forgiven beginning after the first 2 years of full-time teaching in the amount of up to $3,000 for each year of teaching, into an amount up to $6,000 for each year of teaching if they are in a school district that's been classified as very sparse, or in a school building with which at least 40% of students qualify for the poverty factor. This program was expanded just last year by the legislature in LB 1218 from 2022 to provide $1,000 in loan forgiveness for student teachers, but that has not been implemented yet. So we are still looking for ways to continue these programs. The EETP provides forgivable loans to Nebraska teachers enrolled in an eligible graduate program. And with these 2 loan forgiveness programs, they're well worth the funding being allocated through the Excellent in Teaching Cash Fund. So both the programs provide young Nebraskans an incentive to enter the education profession and to continue their educational development through coursework that leads to much needed endorsements in the shortage areas of special education, early childhood, math science, counseling, speech pathology, reading, English language arts, and career education. And I see I have a red light, so I just want to end my testimony with saying we have allocated technically a proposal for the percentages. So you'll notice in the current LB 705, there are 7 allocations on page 5. We're proposing to add an 8th allocation that includes the Excellent to Teaching Cash Fund at 8%, and then readjusting the rest of the percentages as follows. I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has about the teaching, Excellent in Teaching Education Fund.
Thank you very much. Question, Senator Linehan.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Albright. If you graduate today with student loans and you work for a nonprofit or public institution for 10 years, aren't your loans forgiven? They're pushed off. You don't have to pay them as long as you're working there. And then if you work for 10 years,
You have to pay.
I'm getting different answers. I'm getting shakes back and forth. But I know of people where that's happening. So there are programs. I just don't know if we're not connecting to them, or maybe our public schools aren't accessing them.
Well, I guess, just in relation to 705, if it's one of those where we are saying other people are going to take care of these things, we're just focused on, in the past, we've had this program in place. And so when we see like an LB 705 that now cancel it because, in my testimony, these teachers are already in the program. They can go up to 5 years in the program, consecutively. And so what we would see is if somebody's in the program for 2 or 3 years now, and this ends, then they're totally cut off from, continuing the program. So
I'm not arguing that this needs to be fixed at all. I'm just trying to figure out where I can find if the schools are accessing the programs, if there's new teachers know if they have student loans, that there is a federal program that if they register for, their loans will be paid off if they stay in public or nonprofit institutions after 10 years, and their payments are pushed off.
I mean,
So you're
it's
saying.
okay if you don't know.
Well,
if you
I'm just
don't
saying,
know.
you wouldn't care if this got added back or not, because you're saying other people should be able to go other places to.
I just want to know all the options.
Oh.
That's what I'm looking for. And it's fine.
Got it.
I don't know if it's, maybe I'm completely wrong. But I know. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Senator Conrad?
Thank you,
Yes.
Senator Albright. And just a quick question and to follow up on Senator Linehan's line of questioning. Would NSCA be willing to work with the committee to kind of figure out how some of the existing programs like the public loan service forgiveness program on the federal level kind of interacts with some of these state level programs, just so that we can figure out where the gaps are, where we can best make investments?
Yeah, we'd be happy to be in those conversations. And I also want to, bring to everybody's attention in 2019, when you did the Education Committee Lottery Study, there's 154-page document that you guys created in 2019 because it was the 5-year review renewal from lottery funds. One of the items that they said that needed to be recommended to continue was the excellence in teaching program. So that was already a recommendation from this committee in the past. And so to see that not continue in this bill was a little bit disheartening, since that was something that has been a continuous piece over the course of the lottery funds since they've started. So.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? I have a quick one. So you are representing the NSEA?
Correct.
Is that right? Are you a lobbyist for them? Or
No, I'm just a member.
Just a member, okay. And
Teacher.
tell me, so you are a teacher?
Mhm.
Okay, so when you closed, talk about what you just said, because I heard you say something about 80%, but maybe you said 8%.
Yeah. So essentially my testimony document, the 7 pieces below, so essentially starting with the Nebraska Opportunity Grant Fund, everything else I think is in 705. We just knew that the Excellent Teaching Cash Fund is not explicitly a line item currently in 705. So we just wanted to put that back in. That 8% is also what was recommended by the committee's lottery study report from 2019. So we just kept the 8% as essentially what the lottery fund committee came up with when they did their report back in 2019.
Okay, thank you very much. No other questions? Thank you for being here. Any other proponents?
Hello, Education Committee, Vice Chair Albright. I'm Bryce Wilson, the Finance Officer for the Department of Education. That's BRYCE WILSON. NDE is a proponent for LB 705. We do recognize there are some provisions that we think could be improved. We look forward to working with Senator Murman and the other members of the Education Committee to address those concerns, and appreciate all the hard work that's already been done on this bill. I'm just going to quickly run through the 4 points that we have for consideration on this bill that we'd like to see addressed. Number 1 on that is to maintain the sunset date that's currently in statute of July 1st, 2024. We already have several contracts in place that extend past the June 30 date that LB 705 changes the allocations on right now. So that would cause some issues there, including the expanded learning opportunity grant programs for the before and after school that are primarily used for a lot of low income families. Those programs are already being put in place, and I've had parents sign up for those programs. So that would be a big issue if the current date in LB 705 was left intact, of changing all this on June 30th of this year instead of 2024. Number 2 is to ensure the Excellence in Teaching Act is funded. I think you've heard quite a bit about that one already. We are also in support of making sure that funding is brought back and made sure that it's in the amended version that gets in there. But I don't think I don't necessarily have anything more to add to that, since it's already been covered by several people so far. The third thing is maintaining the expanded learning grant funds. That 1% that's currently used for that program is about $250,000 per year. That is currently the only state appropriation for the summer and after school programs there. So we'd like to see that continue forward. Again, that is in the current version. It's not in the LB 705 first version of that bill. And then the last thing is we'd like to see the innovative grant funds, which continue in the LB 705 version at 17%. We'd like to see that reframed a bit so that it is changed from being innovative focused to being evidence-based practices and interventions focused, so that it allows for build out of programs that have already been identified through the innovative program or grant process that occurred initially with this. We did the work, we went out and worked with schools and ESUs to develop or find those innovative processes. And now we're working to build those out. And so we'd like to see that flexibility added in there. If the expanded learning grant fund is not decided to be funded at that 1% level, we'd like to see the opportunity, have the language in there under the innovative grant funds to do that in that area, as well, as we feel like that is a very important piece of the lottery funds. So I guess I got the red light. So with that, I would take questions.
Is there anything else you want to finish on yours?
I hit it quick.
Thank you. Any questions, Senator Albrecht? Oh, geez. Senator Linehan?
A lot of hearings today. Thank you, Senator Albright. Go over this first one again. Maintain July 1, 24 Sunday.
Yes. So the current lottery funds were allocated out and through June 30th, 2024.
Okay.
So contracts were written as such, anticipating that we would have those funds under the current allocation through the June 30th, 2024 timeframe.
Okay.
LB 705, under its first version that was that bill was originally dropped, changes that date to June 30th, 2023. So this June coming up.
So
we already have contracts and stuff in place that goes past this June 30 timeframe, including those expanded learning opportunity grants and programs.
Okay, give me an example, a couple examples, if you can.
The examples of the contracts or what that expanded learning opportunity?
Expanded learning opportunities.
So I'm not the expert in it, but what it does is it provides school districts. There's a list, I think, of about 7 or 8 school districts that were approved by our board for projects that, again, I think the number I saw was 74% of the students that use those are low income students for before and after school programs. And they're identified, or they're targeted to supplement school activities and be more kind of hands-on learning opportunities for those kids in those before and after school programs.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Very much appreciate it.
Any questions from the committee? I have one.
Okay.
Okay, so going into your second key improvements, on the last one, you say one option would be to pull the 8% from the excellence in teaching from the behavioral training cash fund, which would be created by LB 705. So are you saying to do away with?
Not
When you say
necessarily.
pull it.
That's just one of the new areas that come in. We're not against that, just trying to figure out where that 8%. The point, I guess, probably shouldn't have included that. The key would be is we feel that 8% needs to go forward, and not sure where exactly that comes from.
So like the last testifier, I'm wondering, because I'm trying to follow all this. So attracting excellence in teaching program and his, if you just cut it off, they're expecting to have this money come to them. So we don't fund something that they're already expecting to have.
Counting on.
And it sunsets, you're wanting certain things to sunset at a certain time. But is this part of the sunset, the second part of the second paragraph that you have down here when you want to pull that? Is that
Under the
sunset?
excellence in teaching?
Yeah,
We're not wanting that to sunset.
you're not wanting it.
No, we want the excellence in teaching to continue. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions?
I have questions.
Senator Wayne?
So what's the difference between behavior training and mental health training?
I don't know that I can answer that question. I don't have an answer for that question.
Okay.
we could go back and we could provide something for you, but
So are these the same 6 categories you had the last 10 years, or expanded innovation grant, community college grant, Nebraska opportunity grant, and distant ed?
in the new proposed one, there's the difference. The behavioral training is different.
Right. I'm asking the initiative 9 dash whatever 8. Did you hand this out? Yeah, you did. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Those-
the last 10 years, 5 years, these other 6 buckets?
Yes, I got your question now. Yes, so those have been the same for the last 8 years at least.
Okay.
Because it was 5 years and then they extended it 3 more.
So what's your KPIs on these? What's your performance indicators that you actually are, that this is actually working? Any one of those categories?
We have to go back. We have that information, but I would have to go back and get it from the people that are in those programs. But we do have that information available.
I would like to know, like,
Well, we
what
built
works
so
and what doesn't.
for like the innovative grants, for example, we went out and the very first one, the first round of the innovative grants were released in 2017, 15, somewhere around there. We went out and opened it up for innovative ideas. The top ones as selected by the state board were selected. Those ideas came back and we determined if they were successful ideas or not. I'd have to go back and see what the metrics were that were used for that work. But then the ones that were determined that to be successful were then in the next round of innovative grants, build out and put into statewide forms so that they could be used by more schools in a way to make those efficiencies be expanded, not just to the schools that originally came up with the ideas or the groups.
I guess my problem is I'm just, like, we give the university money, then we also come back and provide a Nebraska opportunity grant. Are we doubling up on the same people?
That one I can't speak
I mean, if
to.
we are, then why not just say, here goes this to have a free education? Like, I guess I'd rather just call it what it is instead of having braided streams of incomes or revenue when it's all coming from the same pot. I mean, general funds and lateral funds, whatever. But
yeah,
I guess that's where I'm really struggling with this idea of these streams are still here, but no, I guess I don't understand. I mean, we have tons of funding streams in this community college gap assistance. Don't we give community colleges a whole bunch of money too? Like,
I'm probably not the right guy to speak to the post-secondary parts to this bill.
And then why? This is just a little. Why would we sign a contract through 2024 without guarantee of the money? Like, who's legal counsel? Like, I'm confused. Like,
Well,
we're signing contracts and hoping the legislature may continue to fund lotto funds.
Well, it was in statute through to June 30, 2024. So we were
That's the
following
current
the current statute.
Okay.
So those contracts were entered into with the understanding that it wouldn't be changed.
Oh, well, that makes more sense now. Whew, save me there.
Yeah.
All right. So we got bigger problems if you're in the
Yeah, we don't do
contract.
that.
Okay. 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 Thank you.
Other questions? So it would be nice if you could provide to the committee when we're making these decisions on which programs are working and the number of people that are engaged in them, and that would be helpful.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, next proponent. Thanks for me. Hello.
Hi,
Thanks for being here.
Senator Albright and members of the Education Committee. My name is Treva Haugard. It's TREVA-HAUGAARD. I am the Executive Director of the Council of Independent Nebraska Colleges, also known as SINC. The Council of Independent Nebraska Colleges is supportive of LB 705 and appreciates Senator Murman for introducing this bill that, if passed, would extend the sunset on programs funded by the distribution of lottery funds used for education. Specifically, SINC is supportive of the extension of the Nebraska Opportunity Grant Program. SYNC represents all 13 of Nebraska's private colleges and universities. Collectively, the private colleges in Nebraska enroll over 30% of students who are Pell Grant eligible, in addition to a strong percentage of students who are first-generation college students. LB 705 provides critical funding specifically for Nebraska students to attend college and reduce their college debt by applying for and receiving scholarships from the Nebraska Opportunity Grant. According to the Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education, as it's already been mentioned here, students receive an average award of $1,721 during the 21-22 academic year. These funds are crucial for students who may be struggling with paying tuition, room and board, books, and other necessities to attend college. SYNC also appreciates the initial discussion in regards to looking at and reconsidering the Excellence in Teaching Act. So I will skip over a little bit of my testimony there for you. SYNC member schools award more than 30% of the education degrees in Nebraska. Students who attend our member institutions utilize the loan forgiveness programs under the Excellence in Teaching Act. These education-specific programs provide a financial source of support that is important to students in Nebraska. In closing, in 2019 and 2020, Nebraska ranked 35th in the country in the amount of state-based aid provided on a per-student basis. Nebraska's students need the Nebraska Opportunity Grant Program funding included in LB 705, as well as the inclusion of the Excellence in Teaching Act. These are critical funds for our students who will soon graduate, obtain jobs, and contribute to our state's economy. Students will be in a better position to live the good life if they have less debt upon graduation. It is simple. This bill will help students and will help Nebraska. For these reasons, SYNC supports LB 705 and is appreciative of the further discussions to include the Excellence in Teaching Act.
Thank you. That was quick. Any questions from the committee?
Got just a quick one here. So would you say that the Nebraska Opportunity Grants, 62% of the program does go to the community colleges and or the groups that you're representing?
Yes, so a share of that 62% is allocated to the 13 private colleges.
Okay.
Those dollars, those Nebraska Opportunity Grant dollars, follow the student.
Okay.
So it's not about a percentage per se that goes to an institution. It follows the student. And so the student has a choice how they utilize their Nebraska Opportunity Grants as to which institution they attend.
Okay.
Very good.
That makes sense. Thank you. No other questions? Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your testimony. Okay, any other proponents?
Thank you.
Hi.
Good afternoon. Senators, members of the Education Committee. My name is John Skretta. That's JOHN-SKRETTA. I'm the Administrator of Educational Service Unit 6. We're headquartered in Milford, serve 16 school districts across a 5-county area. I'm here today in that capacity, as well as for Nebraska's Educational Service Unit Coordinating Council. That's the umbrella organization representing Nebraska's ESUs. I'm providing proponent testimony on behalf of a number of educational organizations today, including ESUCC, NCSA, NERCSA, NASB, as well as LPS Lincoln Public Schools. So I am your alphabet soup testimony today. So first, we want to thank Senator Murman for all the work on this bill, and also kudos to Senator Walz for the prior significant time, energy, and work put into getting the bill to this point. Overall, as the handout references, we're very supportive of changes outlined in LB 705. There are some concerns that you've heard, I think, some ample testimony about regarding timing, just the timeline of the implementation of this and the adverse impact that it could have. Just want to share a few more words about what Bryce Wilson referenced in the NDE testimony. A little bit of information and context from LPS, for instance. The Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant Funds have already been identified by the state of Nebraska, 2 local entities for the 23-24 school year. Those funds are $1.16 million statewide and $158K for Lincoln Public Schools alone. Those go to support things like community learning centers, extended school day learning supports for children who need them and benefit greatly from them. So just wanted to mention that. Research has shown that providing those additional supports and expanded learning opportunities have a big impact on enhancing academic achievement. I also want to point out that the bill addresses a small amount of funds allocated for distance education. It's on page 7. There is no sustainability plan, and currently that would expire, meaning the 3% allocation for DL funds in Nebraska would disappear. We would urge the committee to consider amending that to incorporate distance learning supports. You've got a handout referencing that from ESU 5. As a final note, there's a 1% set aside for the Door to College Scholarship. As a parent of 4 college guys, if you could add a DoorDash or Uber Eats scholarship, it'd really help the family's bottom line. Thanks, and appreciate all your work on the Lottery Bill Fund, and would be happy to take any questions you might have.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Scarita, right? Scarita?
Scarita.
Was that your teacher from relation?
I think
perhaps.
Yeah, my wife Sarah was a former teacher and coach in the Seward Public Schools, now at the University of Nebraska.
You had her presence here, but thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
You got any other proponents?
Hello, my name is Edison McDonald, EDISON, MCDONALD. I'm here representing the ARC of Nebraska. We're Nebraska's largest membership organization representing people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. We support LB 705 as a tool to decrease the usage of improper restraint and seclusion. The type of training this can help to fund decreases the use of restraint by instead providing training that focuses on de-escalation over the use of force. LB 705 provides for the following: behavioral awareness training for school employees, including trauma as a source of behavioral concern, PBIS, verbal intervention, and de-escalation techniques. Creates a behavioral awareness contact person facilitating mental health and counseling services, community resources for families, an innovation grant program, teacher recruitment, retainment, school improvement, reading and math skills improvement. We are concerned because Nebraska has some of the weakest protections against restraint and seclusion in the nation. When restraint and seclusion is used, 40.4% of the time it's on students with autism, 2.3% of the time on students with a learning disability, 2% on a student with a speech language impairment, 1.8% on a student with another intellectual disability. And the non-disabled categories include 28.3% of a students with an emotional disturbance, 16.8 on a student with another health impairment, 7.6 on other, and 1.2 on consent to evaluate. We are seeing this current special education crisis with significant increases in the usage of restraint and seclusion. We see understaffed and undertrained teachers and other staff, in particular paras, who don't have the ability to focus on those healthy de-escalation techniques and instead go straight to physical action in which they are untrained in how to do safely. Therefore, we believe that the funding provided in LB 705 is key. I did want to address specifically, it sounded like there might be some considerations around cutting either the behavioral health or the mental health funds, and we would be very opposed to that. And in terms of the difference between the two, I really saw the two, the behavioral health really focusing more on that physical intervention, whereas the mental health focusing more on kind of those suicide, depression, anxiety pieces. And with that, any questions?
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, thanks for being here. Any other proponents?
Hi there. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Albright and the senators of the Education Committee. Again, my name is Courtney Wittstruck, COURTNEY WITTSTRUCK.
So I'm going to kind of go off script a little bit because I had so many predecessors here that already covered everything pretty much that I was going to talk about. But I do want to go on record to say that Community College Association, we are greatly in favor of this bill, especially as it pertains to NOG, dual credit, and gap assistance. And I wanted to address a few of the questions that you had earlier, Senator Wayne. So community college credit or community college gap assistance, it's designed to address literally the gap between like NOG and Pell grants and students that would otherwise be eligible but for their program of study. So if someone is studying, say, concrete finishing, John Deere Tech, or something like that, that wouldn't be eligible for Pell because it's not enough credit hours for Pell or for something else, for some other reason, then they would be eligible to fill this gap in their funding. So it's designed specifically to address high need fields. So there's a whole list of them on the CCPE website that you can go to, but it's everything that we always talk about in education, the healthcare, transportation, logistics, construction, manufacturing, a whole list of all of the things that are discussed here pretty much every day. So they're in high need fields, but the key is they're credit or no credit. So there are some like, maybe industry certifications or things. They have to have a recognized credential, and they have to, whether it's local or federal or state, they have a recognized credential, but the students there aren't eligible for Pell or NOG. So it literally is that gap filler. It also is, it's designed to be identified skilled workforce shortages. So that's why it's got specific fields assigned to it. And again, it's for those same low-income students that just aren't eligible for Pell.
Thank you.
Oh,
Any other
sorry, thank you.
questions?
Did that answer your question?
Okay. Well, I mean, the issue is even in that scenario, you got the Perkins grant. There's the Perkins grant is for CTE. It's I think every community college has it, and including some funding goes to high school. So I just feel like we are tripling, quadrupling up on different funding sources for the same kids, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I'm not trying to figure it out today, and it's probably going to be here after I leave in 2 years. So yes, you answered partly the question.
Can I respond to your point? So first of all, just want to make clear on the CTE Perkins funding. So yes, community colleges receive federal Perkins funding, but Nebraska is actually the only state in the country that does not receive a state funding match for CTE. So that will be coming up in another bill, LB 610. But in addition to that, so when you said earlier about don't community colleges receive state funds? And we do, but it's for operations. It doesn't take the place of the grants like the NOG or the Pell grants. It's for the operation of the college.
I'm going to have a debate today about it but these are the same kids that we pay for in high school. Then they go to community college, we're paying for them again. We have multiple funding streams. On top of that, if they happen to have a criminal background, we have a whole Nebraska Crime Commission that gives out dollars for CTE and multiple education. It's like we spend a lot, and I'm not seeing a bang for our buck. And so maybe I'm just the one here on the committee wondering, but if we spend time on education and if this bill comes out, there's going to be some serious conversations about all of our funding streams and what that looks like. Because again, I can go to Nebraska Crime Commission. It seems like we're all targeting the same kids in multiple different ways, but there's a whole lot of people making a whole lot of money off of this because they all got jobs and they're all older and it ain't getting to the kid. That's my problem. So I don't expect you to solve that today. I don't expect me to solve it today. So we'll just keep having conversations.
And when it comes to workforce, I know that's definitely a question because we have a big problem in Nebraska. And at least I know I can speak from the community college side, as you all know, our tuition is very minimal compared to the benefit to the workforce that our employees or our students bring. So,
agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Any other questions?
No,
Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Vice Chair Albright. And I think thanks for information and patience. And I think, Senator Albright mentioned that it's a new member of the committee, and I fall in that boat as well. And just to echo maybe some of the concerns or frustrations that maybe your folks are feeling from the committee here today, I know that I'm kind of grappling with it in my head too, is just to get a better understanding about like how these revenue streams work together with general fund or tuition, and probably a better question for the post-secondary coordinating commission folks that were here, but like, what's the plan and the vision, and how do these component parts kind of work to advance or effectuate that? Because I think we all kind of want to move in the same direction and being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar and making sure that we're helping create pathways to education and opportunity for students, whether they're at community college, state college, or university, but just trying to just figure out how the pieces work together so that we can have a better understanding about how to accomplish some of those goals. I know that's something that I've been struggling with in the course of the debate and today, and is definitely bigger than just the communications on this bill. So I just really appreciate some time after the hearing to just kind of walk through those things with state colleges, university, and community colleges.
Yeah, we absolutely would be open for that. One thing I can say is when you say it's kind of confusing to figure out where these funds will be best used and how to best use them, I will say when it comes to knowing where these funds need to be used most and could be best used, the local communities are the ones that really have that understanding. So I know we have some other bills, coming up and that are in process, but that's why when it comes to looking at local control and that local decision-making power from the community to decide what programs they need, that's why it's such an important issue for us.
No, and I don't disagree that it's striking the right balance so that the local folks can be nimble and meet be responsive to community needs. But I also think it's our job to kind of chart a statewide plan and vision and provide resources to kind of help people kind of grow in the same direction in that regard, while balancing local control considerations, which is always a challenge. But I think that's helpful. It's probably just a much bigger conversation.
We're happy to be a part of it. We supply a lot of the rowers.
Yes,
so.
yes, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Any other questions? Seeing none, thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
You bet. Do we have any other proponents wishing to speak? Any other proponents? Hi. How are you doing? Good afternoon.
Thank you, Senator Albrecht and members of the committee. My name is Jeff Cole, Jeffcole, and I'm network lead for Beyond School Bells. That's a public-private partnership housed at the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation. So I apologize in advance. I submitted a letter on Friday and didn't bring copies, so it's in the file somewhere. But a lot of the issues that were raised earlier today, I'll be pointing out as well. But I didn't realize as an opponent to it that so many people who were proponents were also pointing out areas. So I was glad to hear that there's some openness to amendments, and mine really focus around the expanded learning opportunity elements. So expanded learning opportunities are a crucial part of the educational experience for so many Nebraska youth, and the funding provided through the ELO Opportunity Grant, to Senator Wayne's point, this is not one you'll have to ferret out all the different funding sources. This is the only state level support going to out of school time programs in Nebraska. So it's not one that's combined with lots of other funds. This is it. So this cut will mean that there will be no direct state funding for after school programs specifically focused on out of school time programs in Nebraska. So that's a concern of ours. We know that the data on after school programs is rock solid. When young people regularly participate in high quality after school and summer programs, good things happen. Their attendance goes up, their behaviors improve, and ultimately their coursework improves. So we have decades of research pointing that out, and it's something we feel really strongly about. And we know it's helping children in 144 programs that are supported across Nebraska using federal funds that are leveraged by local dollars. And the leverage piece is the second thing I wanted to focus on. The grant awards that were made during the last cycle that the last legislation said was going to be paid through 2024. That $1.1 million that were allocated to those 2-year grant programs were leveraged by another $1.1 million per legislative mandate in private funds to create a pool of $2.2 million to support these efforts that are going on by programs across the state. And those efforts are underway now. And as a couple of speakers, I can talk to that specific point about the types of programs that are being funded. That would face some critical challenges in over 100 buildings across the state, serving thousands of kids in a number of different communities. And then the last piece was the question about the innovation network that we're partnering with the Department of Education on to support expanded learning opportunities. Also highly leveraged, so we're trying to leverage those with a 3-to-1 match of private to public dollars that will again be directly invested in programs across the state, as well as organizations across the state. Groups like the Nebraska Farm Bureau Association group, we're working with the foundation to develop more ag-based after-school programming. So it would have pretty significant impacts across the sector of out-of-school time programs. So that's why we're opposed and are glad that you're open to.
So you're
amendments.
opposed to the bill, you're
Absolutely.
saying, not a proponent, okay? So
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I
that's
heard
okay.
an opponent call.
Well, that's okay, we're on opponents then.
Okay,
Here we go.
good.
All right, appreciate
So I'm
the
done, yeah.
testimony. Any questions? Senator Linehan.
Thanks, Vice Chairman Albright. You said that you leveraged federal funds for the program too, but then you went to private. So how much federal money is involved in this?
Right. So every year the Department of Education gets an allocation from a program called the 21st Century Community Learning Center Grant Program. And that's $6 million a year that the Department of Education grants out. And currently they're funding programs in 144 schools across the state.
So after school bells is only where the State Department of Ed is sending federal dollars?
No, the funding in LB 705 going to the opportunity grants, those are the dollars that you guys are sending out to communities across the state, and then they're being matched on the local basis. With us at Beyond School Bells, we're partnering on one of the opportunity grants that the department is able to give out around innovations. So we're the Nebraska ELO Innovation Network. So we received $250,000 from the lottery funds, and then match that with $750,000 from Nebraska and other private sources.
So you don't get any of the federal funds?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. Any other opponents to 705? Any other opponents? Seeing none, anyone in a neutral capacity?
Good afternoon, Senator Albright, members of the Education Committee. My name is J. Ritchie Morrow. That's J space RITCHIE MORROW. I am the Financial Aid Officer with the Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education. I was not planning on testifying. I was going to let Dr. Baumgartner handle all this, but as Senator Linehan was asking about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, I was one of the people that was shaking my head back there. So I thought I'd come up and try to explain it just a little bit so you have some information on it when you go into exec session to talk about it. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is a federal loan forgiveness program. It assists students in forgiveness of their student loans, of their federal student loans, I should specify. It does not assist with private student loans, just federal student loans. You do have to make payments on the loans while you are in the forgiveness program. You must first make 120 payments or over 10 years, payment each month, and then you can qualify to have those loans forgiven. The qualifier is that you must work in a nonprofit organization. So like a 501c3, state government, federal government, public institutions, private institutions, whether they're college or K through 12. So that is a program out there that's available to teachers that teach in public or private nonprofit schools. So it is another program that's out there to assist our teachers in getting their student loans forgiven. So I didn't want to take up much time. I know it's been a long afternoon for you, but I did just want to give you a little bit of that information. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might
That
have.
was very good. That was helpful. Any questions from the committee? Senator Linehan?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Albright. So somebody else sent me some information. It says that the payment you have to make on those 120 months can be based on your income.
Yes,
So,
go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Well, there are different repayment options for federal student loans. The standard loan, which everybody is set up with once they graduate from college, is over 10 years. So if you're in the standard loan repayment process, you're not going to get any loans forgiven because you'll have all your loans repaid in 10 years.
But there's a minimum payment.
There are different options. You can do an extended repayment plan. You can do a repayment plan that's based on income. Some of those can be extended out to 20 or 25 years. So if you apply for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, you'd want to do one of those extended repayment plans. So you wouldn't have your loan balance at zero when you come to 10 years to be forgiven, because there wouldn't be anything to be forgiven.
Has the federal government started repayment of loans again?
Not until July. Yeah. The plan is right now, there's the blanket forgiveness program. It's in the Supreme Court. And so they have said either 2 months after the Supreme Court rules or in July, whichever comes first.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Any other neutral testimony? Seeing none, we had 5 proponent letters, 1 opponent, and 1 neutral. And that'll close LB 705, and we will open with.
He wants to close.
Oh, you want to close? Oh, sorry. Wait, sorry. Hello, Senator Murman. Nice of you to come back and close for us. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say these programs that are set up with paid by the lottery, they're originally meant to be pilot innovative programs, and that's why we're looking at them every 5 years. So ideally, I guess they would be moved, if they're doing what they should be doing, they should be moved into the general fund, and we should probably look at other innovative programs, pilot programs, but that's not always the case. Just wanted to mention the behavioral training cash fund. I do have a bill that will use that fund, LB 811, and there was a article, front page of Sunday World Herald this week that talked about the need for behavioral training and the problems with behavior in our schools in Nebraska. It was a survey by the NSEA. So we do need to do a lot of work on these different funding amounts, but that'll just be another challenge for the committee.
Very good.
So that's all I've got, unless anybody got
Any
a
questions
question
from the
that.
committee?
I have a question. So are you planning on moving these programs to, sorry.
Go ahead.
Start talking. Are you planning on moving these to general fund? I mean, is your recommendation to move?
Well,
these
that's
to-
the ideal, but no, we probably won't be doing that right now, but that was the original intention of the lottery.
Right, I guess that's what I'm okay.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. And we'll close LB 705 and we'll get started with LB 702 by Senator Murman. Does anybody need a break? Everybody get? No, these are good. Okay, these will take long. Sit still.
I think he's gonna set a land speed record here.
That's right. Everybody's leaving. This is a good thing. Yes. Okay, very good. Thank you. Senator Murman, LB 702.
Yes, LB 702 is only a placeholder bill for the ESUs.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Do we have any proponents for 702? LB 702, any proponents? Any opponents? Seeing none, anyone in neutral? Senator Murman, would you like to close? You're going to waive closing. We had 0 letters for proponents, 1 opponent, and no neutral on 702. So we'll close LB 702 and move to LB 701. Senator Murman.
LB 701 is just as simple. It's a placeholder for the TIOSA program.
Okay. Any questions about that from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Do we have any proponents on LB 701? Any opponents on 701? Anyone in neutral? You don't have to sit down. So we have no proponents, opponents, or neutral. So would you like to close, Senator Murman? He waives closing, and again, we have 1 letter that is opponent, and the other 2 are no letters submitted. So we will close LB 701 and close the hearing today for the education. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna have to keep up.